cold tin touches your fingertips before sunrise, and in a 1930s Baltimore oyster cannery, the oyster capper's bench is yours for the long, quiet day ahead. Settle in, and let the room take its time around you. We begin where the harbor air has already found its way indoors, carrying salt, coal smoke, wet rope, and the faint sweet metal smell of clean cans stacked in careful towers beside your station. The floor is damp beneath your shoes, not flooded, just shining in patches where rinse water has traveled toward the drain. Somewhere beyond the wall, the Patapsco lies dark and patient, and the first carts from the wharf have left a trail of grit near the receiving door. Here, in this 1930s Baltimore oyster house, your work is not to hurry the oysters from the bay, but to give each filled can its quiet lid, its firm seal, its small promise of keeping. The cannery wakes by layers, the way a stove warms slowly. We stay close beside you, not above the work, because this kind of day is known through hands more than through names. Your fingers learn the rim of each can before your eyes need to check it. The cap sits lightly at first, bright and thin, and then the machine waits to fold metal into metal. Baltimore has been awake in pieces for hours, though the streets still hold the blue of early morning. Men have come in from the water with baskets and barrels, and shuckers have taken their places where the shells pile up in grey-white drifts. Their knives make a small repeated sound, a twist and lift, a scrape and drop, and the oysters pass onward in buckets of pale meat and brine. By the time they reach your side of the room, they have been rinsed, drained, sorted, and weighed, and the day has already left its chill on every wrist in the building. You stand near the capping line, where the filled cans arrive close enough to touch. The oysters inside are soft and grey, curled in their liquor, still carrying the smell of the Chesapeake beneath the sharper scent of steam. You do not see the open water now, but it is in everything. It is in the damp cuffs of the men who unloaded the boats, in the grit caught under the nail of your thumb, and in the low murmur of everyone counting by habit. A can comes forward, and your hand moves. The cap is not heavy. That is part of the work's calm. One thin round of tin plate lies against another, and you settle it so the edge sits true. If the lid tilts, the seamer will complain in its own blunt way, and the can may leak or buckle later. So your touch is light, but not careless. You feel the rim, turn the can a little, and let the cap rest square before it goes on. The capping machine has a steady voice once it starts. It does not chatter like the shucking knives, and it does not roar like a factory press. It turns with a compact, oily rhythm, pressing and rolling the edge until the lid and body become one closed shape. The handle is cool at first, then warmed by the room and by your palm. You feed the work gently, keeping pace with the cans that come to you, and the machine answers with a soft clench of metal. In the 1930s Baltimore oyster trade, much of the day belongs to these small crossings between hand and tool. The bay sends its harvest inland by boat, wagon, rail, and habit. The cannery receives it, divides it, cleans it, measures it, and sends it out again under a label that may travel farther than you ever do. Your part is one narrow place in that movement, but the narrowness is comforting. You know where to stand. You know what must happen next. A foreman passes behind you with a pencil tucked above one ear, and his shoes make a damp sound on the concrete. He does not need to speak unless something has gone wrong. The tally sheets sit near the weighing table, smudged at the corners, their columns holding the day's count in small, practical marks. Around you, workers talk in low voices when the machines allow it, mostly about weather, car fare, children, rent, church suppers, aches in the fingers, and whether the next tide will bring a better load. The talk rises and falls like breath. You learn the room by smell as much as sight. There is brine, always brine, clean and mineral, and there is the greenish scent of shell heaps outside the door. There is hot metal from the sterilizing room, coal smoke from the boiler, and soap where someone has scrubbed a table before the inspector's walkthrough. Sometimes the air turns sweet with coffee from a tin cup set near a window, and sometimes it sharpens with vinegar from someone's wrapped lunch. These are ordinary smells, but they hold the whole day together. The cans come in rows, and your hands meet them one by one. You set the cap, guide the seam, check the edge, and move the finished can along. Again and again, the same small ceremony repeats, never grand, never meant to be noticed by anyone buying supper in a city far away. Yet there is a dignity in repetition when the repetition is honest. We can feel it with you, the way the body accepts the pattern and the mind softens around it. By full morning, the light through the high cannery windows has changed, and the oyster capper's day in Baltimore settles into its deeper rhythm. The room is brighter now, though not warm in any easy way. Sunlight comes through panes filmed with salt and smoke, turning the steam pale where it hangs above the tables. You can see the scratches on the work surface, the worn place where your wrist rests, and the dark line of oil near the base of the machine. Outside, a cartwheel knocks over uneven boards, and inside, the capping line keeps its modest pace. Nothing about it asks to be admired. It simply asks to be done well. Your apron has taken on the cool dampness of the room. It brushes your knees when you shift your weight, and the cloth feels heavier than it did at dawn. Beneath it, your hands have found their steady shape, thumb near the rim, fingers curved under the can, wrist turning just enough to square the lid. You no longer think about every motion. Your body has made a quiet agreement with the bench. In these Baltimore oyster houses, the capper's work follows the shucker's work, and that means your day listens to theirs. When their buckets fill quickly, your table fills quickly too. When the shucking room slows, perhaps because the shell stock is small, or the meats are being sorted carefully, your side of the room opens into little pockets of waiting. You wipe your hands, shift a stack of lids closer, and glance toward the passage window where the next tray will appear. Waiting is part of the job. It has its own posture. The oysters arrive already measured into cans, each portion carrying the judgment of another pair of hands. Standards mattered, even in such plain rooms. Too much liquor could spill and spoil the seam. Too little could leave the meat looking bare. Grit had to be rinsed away, shell chips found and removed, worms and bits of mud picked out before packing. You may not do all those tasks yourself today, but you understand them because the cap will tell on everyone. A poorly prepared can is hard to close neatly, so you notice the surface before you cap it. A good can has a settled look, oysters lying below the lip, liquor trembling when you touch the side. If the rim is wet, you wipe it with a practiced motion. If a scrap of oyster clings where the lid must fold, you ease it away. The work is small enough to seem almost invisible, but every sealed can depends on these mild corrections. A capper learns the difference between enough and almost enough. The machine waits with its rollers set and its metal throat open. Older hands call it by whatever name the plant uses, but to you it is mostly a companion of pressure. Its moving parts must stay clean, because a sliver of shell or a smear of meat can make the seam uneven. You keep a rag near, damp and folded, and now and then you clear the place where the can seats itself. The rag smells of tin, brine, and machine oil. It is not a bad smell after a while. We can pause here with you for one breath, because the beauty of this work is not in speed, it is in fit. The lid must meet the body exactly, and the metal must curl without tearing. The seal is made by force, yes, but also by alignment, by the small patience of placing one round thing on another. A person half asleep can understand that. So can a person half frozen on a winter morning by the harbor. The foreman's pencil scratches again near the tally table. Somewhere a woman laughs softly, not loudly enough to break the room, just enough to warm it. Someone has brought in a newspaper folded to the weather, and it lies near a crate, grey from the press and damp at one corner. The Depression years have made everyone careful with coins, with food, with hours, with anything that might be wasted. Even so, the day carries ordinary kindnesses. A worker nudges a stack of caps nearer when your left hand is busy. The capper's bench has its own small geography. Empty lids sit on one side, nested so tightly they shine like a short column of moonlight. Filled cans come from the other, cool and slightly slick. Finished cans gather beyond the machine, ready for heat, labeling, packing, or whatever step this house gives them next. Under the bench, your shoes rest on a board that keeps your feet from the coldest water. The board has softened at the edges from years of boots. Baltimore outside the cannery is a city of brick, smoke, streetcars, row houses, church bells, and ships. Inside, it becomes a city of smaller sounds. The hiss of steam is a street. The knock of cans is a curb. The murmur of workers is a neighborhood you can move through without raising your voice. You are not separate from the city here. You are one of the quiet ways it feeds itself and others. By mid-morning, the cannery has forgotten its own beginning. The first chill is still in the floor, but the room has built a damp warmth around the machines and bodies. Your shoulders loosen as long as you remember not to hunch. Your fingers feel tender at the places where tin edges have pressed all morning, and now you change your grip slightly, saving one joint, then another. The work teaches you little economies. A turn of the wrist can spare a hand by noon. You take the next can and settle the cap. It makes the faintest tick as metal meets metal. You guide it into place, listen for the machine's smooth roll, and then move it on. Tick, turn, press, release. The rhythm is not written anywhere, but the room knows it. We stay with that rhythm, because it is the heart of the oyster capper's day in 1930s Baltimore, quiet enough to disappear into, steady enough to hold you. There are moments when the smell of the harbor deepens suddenly, as if a door has opened to the wharf. The air comes in cold, with tarred rope, fish boxes, wet wood, and the heavy mineral scent of shells. For a few seconds, you can almost feel the bay beyond the buildings, broad and gray under a winter sky. Then the door closes, and the cannery air gathers itself again. Steam blurs the window. The machine keeps turning. Your hands return to the next lid. Some of the oysters have come from beds far down the Chesapeake, carried by boats that stopped where watermen had worked before daylight. Some have passed through hands on the eastern shore, through small towns where packing houses stood close to creeks and marshes. By the time they reach Baltimore, the oysters are no longer only a catch. They are a schedule. They are freight. They are wages, ledgers, labels, lunches, rent and supper. You feel all that only dimly, through the plain demand of the next can. When the line slows, you straighten the stacks. This too is part of the job. Caps must sit clean and dry, because damp lids cling together and waste time. You tap a stack lightly against the bench until the edges fall even. The sound is delicate, almost like a coin laid on a counter. Then you set the stack within reach, not too close to the wet cans, not so far that your shoulder must reach all day. A good bench is arranged for tired hands, and as the morning wears toward the lunch hour, the work changes not by stopping, but by asking you to notice your own body more carefully. Your back has begun to speak in a low way. Not pain exactly, but a steady reminder of the hours spent leaning toward the machine. You shift one foot, then the other, and the damp board under you gives a little. The air near the boiler has thickened, and your hairline feels warm while your fingers remain cool from the cans. It is an old contradiction in seafood work, heat and cold living in the same room. The steam rises, the water chills, and you stand between them. At the Baltimore oyster capper's bench, lunch is not a grand event. It arrives in a wrapped bundle, a tin pail, a waxed paper packet, or a reused jar with coffee gone lukewarm. You may have bread, a boiled egg, a slice of ham, a piece of cake, or yesterday's potatoes tucked in with salt. The food tastes of home first, then of the cannery, because every bite carries a trace of brine from your hands no matter how well you wash. You do not complain about this. It belongs to the day. Before you eat, you rinse at the basin, where the water runs cold over knuckles marked by tin and damp cloth. Soap cuts the oil only partly. The smell of oysters lingers under the nails, mild and stubborn. You dry your hands on a towel that has seen too many hands already, and then you take your place where there is room to sit. The floor is still wet, the bench still full, the machines still warm enough to tick as they settle. We let the room soften around lunch. Voices become easier when the line rests. Someone talks about a child with new shoes, someone about a landlord, someone about the price of coal. A radio may be playing elsewhere in the building, faint enough that the words blur, leaving only a thin ribbon of music behind the clink of cups. Outside, a gull calls over the harbor, and the sound seems both near and far, like a memory of open water brought into brick. The cappers do not leave the work entirely during the pause. Your eyes still move toward the bench, checking the stacks, noticing whether the rag needs rinsing, whether the finished cans have been carried off. Habit keeps a little lamp burning in the mind. That is not restlessness. It is belonging to a process. When the whistle or call brings everyone back, you will not be surprised. Your hands will know where to go before the first full thought returns. The lunch hour is short enough to keep its edges. You wrap what remains, fold the paper carefully if it can be used again, and tuck the cup where it will not be knocked over. Around you, workers rise with small sounds of effort, chairs dragging, shoes scraping, aprons being retied. The cannery begins to lift itself from the pause. Steam comes back first, then the clatter of trays, then the resumed turning of machines. Afternoon light in the oyster house has a different color. It is flatter, more gray than gold, and it lies across the cans without much shine. Your hands are slower for the first few minutes after sitting, so you let them find the pace again. Cap, seat, guide, release. The motion returns like a song you did not know you had memorized. Soon the line is moving, and the room is once again made of repeated gestures. The oysters after lunch may be no different from the oysters before lunch, but you are different. You notice more. You feel the tiny ridge on a can body where the metal was joined. You hear when the seamer's roll is clean and when it catches slightly. You see how a lid reflects the window in a warped, watery circle before your palm covers it. These are not large observations. They are the kind a worker gathers because the eyes must rest somewhere. By early afternoon, the Baltimore cannery carries the warm, damp smell of a place fully used. The morning's freshness has gone, and in its place is something deeper, brinier, more human. Aprons are stained, sleeves are rolled. The drain carries threads of water under the tables. Outside, the shell pile has grown pale and sharp, and when the door opens you can hear shells sliding down shells with a dry, brittle sound. Even the waste has its rhythm. You continue at the capper's place, matching your motions to the flow of cans. When a lid slips, you correct it without fuss. When a can arrives too full, you set it aside for attention. When the machine needs a wipe, you give it one. The whole day is made of these quiet refusals to let small problems become larger ones. That is what skill often looks like in ordinary work. It is calm correction, made before anyone needs to speak. The sealed cans gather in orderly groups, each one plain and closed, no longer trembling with open liquor. They will go onward to heat, to cooling, to labels, to crates, to wagons, to shops, to pantries. Someone may open 1 week later and think only of stew, frying, supper, or a special Sunday dish. They will not think of your thumb on the rim, or the damp board under your feet, or the machine turning softly beside the Patapsco. That is all right. Some work is meant to vanish into usefulness. Still, we remember it here. We keep one hand on the bench with you, one ear tuned to the steam, one eye on the gray light of Baltimore beyond the window. The oyster capper's day is not a story of spectacle. It is a story of placement, pressure, timing, and care. It is the shape of a lid made true over and over again, until the afternoon begins to lean toward evening and the stacks of empty caps grow lower by degrees. The empty caps sit lower in their stack now, and the top one no longer reaches the worn mark on the wall behind your bench. You notice this without counting, because a working day teaches the eye to measure what the hand will soon need. The metal circles have lost their early shine under your fingers, and each one comes away with the faintest whisper, tin separating from tin. The Baltimore oyster capper's afternoon is made of such whispers, almost too small to name, but steady enough to carry you. A man from the heating room passes with a tray of sealed cans, and the heat follows him like breath from a stove. It touches your face for a moment, then fades into the larger dampness of the cannery. The cans he carries have already left your station, but you know them in a practical way, by their closed rims and settled weight. They will be warmed through, not roughly, but with enough care to keep the oysters safe for travel. Every sealed thing has another room waiting for it. We stay near your bench as the afternoon stretches, because this is where the day's patience is most visible. The capper does not have the drama of the shucking knife, or the strength of unloading barrels, or the authority of the clerk with the ledgers. Your task is quieter than that. It asks for attention at the edge of a circle, where a small flaw can hide in plain sight. You look, feel, place and pass it on, and by doing so you keep the whole line calm. Sometimes the caps come with a little burr along one side, a catch of metal you can feel before you can see. You set those aside, not with irritation, but with the same plain judgment you bring to an overfilled can. A bad lid wastes more time if it is trusted than if it is paused. Your thumb has learned the difference between a clean rim and a doubtful one, and your palm has learned how a proper can should sit. These are skills no certificate announces. They live in the hands. Outside the windows, Baltimore's afternoon moves through its own routines. Streetcars ring their bells on tracks that shine in the damp weather, and horses still pull some wagons through streets that smell of coal smoke and river mud. The city is not old-fashioned to itself. It is simply present, carrying both motor trucks and carts, both new machinery and old habits, both the hard years of the Depression and the ordinary need for supper. Inside the cannery you hear only pieces of it, softened by brick and steam. The oyster cans keep coming, and you give each one the same respect. A fresh cap rests between your fingertips, cool at the edge, and slightly warmer at the center where your hand has touched it. You set it down as if covering a cup of tea, light first, then firmer, then into the machine. The rollers close the seam with a muted pressure, and when the can emerges, your eye travels the rim once more. The seam should look even, like a neat hem on cloth. Inspection is woven through the day rather than set apart from it. A foreman may take a can at random, turn it under the light, and run a finger around the top. Someone may weigh a group again, check a label count, or mark a crate for a particular order. In a Baltimore oyster house of the 1930s, reputation travels with every tin. A leaking can does not only spoil food, it travels back as a complaint, a lost buyer, a small stain on the name printed in ink. You may not read every label closely, but you know their colors by habit. Some are blue, some red, some cream with dark letters, and all of them try to make the sea look orderly. Labels speak of Chesapeake freshness, Baltimore packing, select oysters, standards, stews, and family tables. But before paper and paste, there is your closed metal seam. The printed promise rests on the quiet work beneath it. You can feel that without making a ceremony of it. By now the sounds of the cannery have become a kind of weather. The shucking knives click and pry. Buckets bump against table legs. The seamer turns, stops, turns again. A distant valve gives off a small hiss, then settles. Someone's shoes squeak near the wash basin. All these sounds layer together until no single one needs your full attention, yet each one would be noticed if it disappeared. The room keeps speaking, and you keep answering with your hands. A tray arrives with cans that need capping quickly, and the rhythm rises, though not sharply. You do not rush in the panicked sense. You only remove the extra spaces between motions. Cap, seat, machine, check. Cap, seat, machine, check. The repeated work can almost rock the mind, and we let it do that, because the body knows how to continue when the thoughts drift like steam above the tables. There is comfort in doing one clear thing well. The afternoon light slides along the window frame, and the Baltimore oyster capper's place grows a little dimmer at the edges. No one calls attention to the change, but everyone feels it. The workday has crossed some invisible mark, and the room begins to think about finishing while still doing what remains. A clerk moves faster between the ledgers and the packing area. The shuckers glance toward the barrels left to open. The heating room asks for more sealed cans before its own schedule tightens. You look at the cap stacks again, then at the line, and you understand the size of the remaining day. Your fingers are wrinkled slightly from dampness, and fine lines of gray have settled into the creases. Tin dust, brine, and machine oil make a thin skin that soap will not fully remove until later. The can edges have pressed little moons into your fingertips. When you flex your hands, the joints answer slowly, but they answer. Work like this does not feel heroic inside the body. It feels like weight, repetition, cold, warmth, and the simple decision to keep going. In some oyster houses, women and men work side by side at different stages, divided less by romance than by custom, speed, pay, and the old arrangement of rooms. Shucking has its own pride and strain. Capping has its own measure of trust. Packing, labeling, steaming, crating, bookkeeping, hauling, and cleaning all depend on one another. You may know only a few of these tasks deeply, but you know the shape of the whole operation the way a person knows a house by its nighttime sounds. The 1930s make wages feel especially real. Every hour has a weight beyond the room. A missed day is felt at the grocer, at the coal bin, at the rent envelope tucked away for Saturday. So the cannery's routine is not merely industrial, it is domestic too, tied to kitchens, shoes, schoolbooks, church collections, and the price of streetcar rides. While you cap the cans, part of your mind may count what the week must cover, though the hands keep their more immediate arithmetic. A can comes to you with a dent near the side seam. It is small, not enough to ruin the contents, but enough to make the lid sit poorly. You turn it under the light and feel the metal give against your thumb. Then you set it aside where it can be checked, because a capper's judgment protects the work from false economy. Better to pause one can than to send trouble down the line. The gesture is tiny, but the reason is sound. The machine takes the next can cleanly. There is pleasure in that, plain and quiet. The lid seats well, the roller folds the seam without catching, and the finished can has the satisfied look of a thing made ready. You do not dwell on it. The next one is already waiting, yet the small pleasure remains somewhere inside you, like the warmth from a cup held between cold hands. Repetition does not erase satisfaction. It often makes room for it. We might imagine the oyster capper's bench as dull from a distance, but distance misses almost everything. Up close, the work is full of differences. One cap sticks to another. One rim needs wiping. One can feels too light. One seam sings faintly under the roller. One tray smells more strongly of brine, because the oysters have carried a little extra liquor. You notice these things without naming them aloud, and that is how the day stays human. The people around you have their own small methods for enduring the hours. One worker hums only when the foreman is out of earshot. Another folds a scrap of cloth under an apron tie to ease a sore place at the waist. Someone keeps a peppermint in a pocket for the middle of the afternoon, and the sweet smell briefly cuts through oyster brine when the paper opens. Someone else has a joke they use too often, but gently, as if repetition has made it a shared tool. The floor has grown slick in places, and you step carefully when carrying anything. Sawdust or salt may be scattered where water gathers, though it never stays dry for long. The drain keeps accepting what the day gives it, a thin run of water clouded by shell dust and scraps. Near the receiving area, the smell is stronger, greener, less refined than at your bench. Near the labeling area, paste and paper make a warmer smell, almost like a schoolroom touched by the harbor. Baltimore's oyster trade has long memory in its walls. Before this day, there were decades of shucking, packing, shipping, arguing over beds, seasons, measures, and the health of the bay. By the 1930s, the great abundance people spoke of in older stories has already changed, thinned in places by overharvest, disease, pollution, and the long hunger of markets. But your day's work does not pause for large history. It holds history in small habits, in cautious handling, in making the most of what arrives. The capper's place belongs to an industry built on tides, but governed by clocks. Boats come by weather and season. Workers arrive by bell and hour. Orders leave by wagon, truck and rail. Oysters begin in mud, grass, shell, and brackish water, yet here they move through scales, tins, steam, paper, crates and ink. You stand at one of the crossings between those worlds. The bay is still there, but now it has a lid. When the afternoon presses on, the line finds a steadier hush, and your Baltimore oyster capper's hands move through the grey light almost by memory. The room is not silent, of course. It could never be silent while cans move and people work. But there is a hush that comes from tired concentration, when talk thins and every person begins to save words for what is useful. You hear the machine more clearly then, the slight change in tone as each conceits. You hear your own breathing when you lean close. You hear the soft knock of finished tins gathering in their tray. Your station smells of metal warmed by friction. It is not hot enough to burn, only warm enough to give off that faint dry scent that belongs to moving parts. The oil on the machine has darkened near the joints, and a small thread of it catches dust along the edge. You wipe what needs wiping, leave what should not be disturbed, and keep your fingers away from the places that pinch. A capper learns respect for ordinary machinery. It is helpful, but it is not forgiving of carelessness. The safety of the work comes through habit more than warning. You feed the can when the opening is ready. You pull back before the roller turns. You never reach under motion. You keep cloth ends tucked and sleeves close. No one announces these rules each hour, because the rules are carried in the way older workers move. You watch them, and over time you become one of the people whose motions teach the next pair of hands. Now and then the machine must be adjusted. A screw is turned, a roller checked, a jam cleared by someone allowed to do it. During those moments your bench gathers stillness. Cans wait in small groups, lids rest in stacks, and your hands hang at your sides or fold lightly over one another. The pause can feel larger than it is. Without the machine's voice, the rest of the cannery comes forward, shucking knives, steam, footsteps, a distant bell from outside. When the machine starts again, the familiar rhythm returns with a kind of relief. It is easier to work than to wait when the body is keyed to motion. You take the first can after the pause with extra care, listening for any uneven sound. The seam closes neatly, the next does too. Soon, the line has forgotten the interruption, and the afternoon resumes its slow crossing toward evening. We can feel how routine absorbs small disturbances without making much of them. The cans themselves are plain, but they represent many little inventions made ordinary by use. Thin steel coated with tin keeps rust away and gives the food a clean container. Rolled seams make lids tight. Heat drives out spoilage and steadies the contents for travel. Labels turn anonymous metal into something a shopkeeper can place on a shelf. None of this seems wondrous at the bench. It seems like work. But work is often the place where invention becomes normal. You may remember older stories from someone who worked before the newer machines, when more of the closing was done by hand, slower and rougher on the wrists. Or perhaps you have heard of houses where the equipment is better, faster, cleaner, and places where it is older than anyone likes to admit. Each cannery has its own character. Some are better lit, some pay more reliably. Some have foremen who shout, and some have foremen who only look over their glasses. You know yours by the air it makes. At your Baltimore Oyster capper's bench, the air is a mixture of usefulness and endurance. No one has decorated the room for beauty, yet beauty keeps appearing in unplanned places. A row of empty tins catches the window light. A wet shell near the door shows purple and pearl beneath its grey outside. Steam softens the hard lines of pipes and rafters. A finished can rests in your palm, perfectly ordinary, perfectly complete, and for 1 second it feels like a small moon. Then it moves on. That is the nature of production. The good work leaves you almost as soon as it is done. You do not keep the cans, just as the shucker does not keep the opened meats, and the hauler does not keep the barrel he lifts. Everyone passes the work forward. The whole room is in agreement to let go. Perhaps that is why the rhythm can be soothing, because nothing clings for long. The next motion arrives and takes the place of the last. The oyster capper's work also teaches the size of a day. Not the size shown on a clock, though the clock matters, but the size felt in muscles and stacks. A full morning is a certain ache between shoulder blades. A busy afternoon is a certain lowering of caps and rising of finished cans. A slow hour is a space where conversation grows. A rushed hour is a tightening in the jaw. By now, you can read the day without asking anyone the time. The foreman checks the remaining orders and says something to the packing side. You catch only a few words, enough to know a shipment must still be made ready. The room shifts around that knowledge. Finished cans move away faster. Labels are counted. Crates are opened, their wood smelling dry and splintery against all the dampness. Nails and hammers begin their own separate rhythm, duller and heavier than the tin sounds at your bench. And as the packing room gathers pace, your own work remains steady, because the Baltimore oyster capper's duty is to keep the lids true until the last needed can is closed. The end of a run has its own feeling. It is not the end of the day yet, but the line begins to reveal the bottom of what it has been carrying. Fewer trays wait beside the station. The stacks of lids are not replaced as quickly. The cans that arrive may belong to a final batch. One size, one order, one label, one destination printed on the clerk's sheet. You do not need to know where they will go. You only need to close them well. Maybe these cans will go north by rail. Maybe they will be sold within Baltimore. Maybe they will travel west enough that the person opening them has never seen an oyster boat or smelled a shell pile after rain. The thought is faintly strange if you let it come. A wet, living thing from the Chesapeake has become something a grocer can stack, count, price, and wrap in paper. Your hands have helped make that passage possible. The capper's bench does not invite daydreaming for long. A tray arrives, and the lids must be set. Still, the mind can drift lightly while the body stays present. You might think of the street outside, the corner store, the walk home, the wash water that will cloud when you put your hands into it. You might think of supper, of feet out of shoes, of a radio voice in the next room. These thoughts do not pull you away. They move alongside the work like quiet boats. The canning room grows warmer near the end of the afternoon, partly from steam, partly from bodies, partly from the building having held the day's labor inside itself. Your collar feels damp, and a loose strand of hair sticks near your temple. The window glass is cooler than the air, and condensation gathers low on the pane. If you look through it, the outside world appears softened, as though Baltimore itself has been steamed and sealed behind glass. The oysters still smell clean, though the room is tired. That matters. Spoiled smell would break the rhythm at once, and everyone would know. Fresh oyster liquor carries the bay with a mineral sweetness, edged by mud, salt, and cold tide. Even after hours inside, you can tell the difference between good brine and something wrong. Workers in such places become skilled through senses before language. The nose, the fingers, the ear, and the eye are all part of the day's tools. You cap another can and feel a slight wobble. Not much, but enough. You lift it back before the machine takes it, wipe the rim, and set the lid again. This time, it sits true. The correction costs only a breath. We notice it because this is where care lives, not in grand declarations, but in refusing to let the small uneven thing pass. The finished seam looks ordinary afterward. Good work often looks as though nothing happened. Across the room, a shucker flexes her hand and reaches for the next shell. The motion echoes your own fatigue in another form. Her knife has met hundreds of hinges today, perhaps more, and the shells have resisted in their silent way. Your cans have not resisted like shells, but they have required their own constant touch. Different tasks, same day. Different tools, same damp air. The cannery holds everyone in a shared cloud of effort. The shell pile outside has become a pale mound by now, and carts may take some shells away for roads, lime, fill, or other uses, depending on the arrangement and the season. Nothing in the oyster business is only one thing if someone can make it useful again. Shells can be waste, seed, roadbed, grit, or memory. You do not handle them much at the capper's bench, but their chalky smell reaches you whenever the door opens. It is the smell of the oyster after the oyster has gone. A clock somewhere in the building marks the hour, though its sound is nearly lost under the room. You do not need the bell. The day has begun to tell you through other signs. The light is lower. The foreman's trips are shorter and sharper. Someone has already rinsed a table that will not be used again today. The broom has appeared near the wall. A bucket of hot water steams by the cleaning shelf, waiting for the work to release you. In the 1930s Baltimore Oyster House, cleaning is not separate from production. It is the second kind of making, the making ready for tomorrow. Tables must be washed, knives rinsed and put away, drains cleared, cans counted, scraps removed, floors swept toward water, and water pushed toward drains. Your own station will need its careful tending. The machine that helped you all day must be wiped and left fit to begin again. No one wants morning to inherit yesterday's neglect. But before that, there are still caps to set. You draw the last stack closer, and it slides on the bench with a thin metallic sigh. The top lids are slightly warmer now from the room. You lift one, then another, and the motion continues. Your shoulders may wish to sag, but your hands keep their promise. The last hour asks for the same attention as the first. A tired seam is still a seam, and it must hold. When the final batch for the packing order reaches you, the Baltimore Oyster capper's bench grows briefly busy again, then begins to empty by quiet degrees. This is how many working days end, not in a clean line, but in uneven little endings. One tray is finished, then another appears. One worker starts cleaning, then is called back for a few more pieces. A machine falls silent, then runs again for 2 minutes. The room pretends to be done before it is done. You have learned not to trust the first silence. You wait for the second, deeper one, when no one brings another tray. The finished cans are carried away in groups, their seams catching dull light. Some may go through a water bath or a heated process according to the house's practice and the product being packed. Some will be cooled and labeled after treatment, so the paper stays clean and bright. The exact route can vary from room to room, order to order, and season to season, but the principle remains simple. Close the food, make it stable, mark it plainly, and send it out. You are close enough to the labeling area to smell paste. It has a soft, starchy odor, warmer than brine and almost domestic. Labels are stacked flat, then lifted, brushed, wrapped, and smoothed around cans by hands that have their own rhythm. A good label must sit straight enough for a shop shelf. The paper cannot wrinkle too badly or cover the wrong seam. Even after the oyster is sealed, there is more touch, more alignment, more human correction before the crate is packed. The crates make the room sound wooden for a while. Slats knock, nails tap and then bite. A hammer's rhythm is slower than the seamer, with more space between each stroke. Dry wood scent mingles with oyster liquor, and for a moment the cannery smells of wharf, pantry, and carpenter's shop all together. Your workbench is still damp and metallic, but the finished goods are already taking on the smell of travel. They are becoming freight. The oyster capper in Baltimore belongs to both the wet world and the dry one. At one side of your day are shells, mud, water, knives, buckets, and brine. At the other are tin, paper, paste, wood, ink, ledgers, and bills of lading. You stand at the threshold where the oyster stops being open and becomes kept. It is a modest threshold, no wider than the rim of a can, yet the whole business must pass through it. When at last the incoming trays slow to nothing, you do not step away immediately. There are always little tasks near the end. A few unused caps must be covered or returned where they belong. A stray can must be checked, a rag rinsed, a drip wiped before it dries sticky. You look over the station as if reading a page. What is out of place will be harder to face in the morning. Better to set it right now, while the day's shape is still in your hands. The machine is turned off, and the loss of its voice changes the room. For hours it has been one of the sounds you leaned on without noticing, and now its absence feels like a space beside you. You hear water more clearly. You hear someone cough near the door. You hear the low thump of a crate set down in the packing room. The still machine smells more strongly of warm oil, and the metal casing gives back the day's heat under your palm. Cleaning begins with practical tenderness. That may sound too gentle for a factory tool, but it is true enough. You wipe away brine because salt is hard on metal. You remove scraps because tomorrow's work deserves a clean start. You dry what needs drying and leave no rag where it can sour. The machine has no feeling, but you treat it as something that has served you all day. Care does not require sentiment, it only requires attention. Hot water loosens what cold water would leave behind. Steam rises around your wrists as you wring the cloth, and for a moment the warmth feels almost luxurious. The rag moves over the bench, lifting grey streaks, oil smears, and dried spots of liquor. The wood or metal surface beneath appears in patches, worn smooth by many elbows and many years. Other workers are doing the same nearby, each restoring a small territory from labor back into readiness. A broom moves across the floor with a wet scrape. Shell chips gather in a pale line. Bits of label paper cling near a table leg. Someone lifts a crate to sweep beneath it, and the floor underneath is darker where it stayed wet all day. The drain receives the rinse water with a soft sucking sound. The smell changes as cleaning goes on. Soap and hot water rise over oyster and oil, not erasing them completely, but laying a clean veil across the room. We move gently with you through this part, because the end-of-day cleaning is part of the oyster capper's routine, not an afterthought. Many accounts of work remember the production and forget the putting away, yet the putting away may be the most restful part to hear. A thing used is returned. A surface dirtied is washed. A tool warmed by labor is cooled and left still. The mind understands this order even when the body is tired. The foreman makes another note, perhaps the final count for the day's run. The numbers belong to him now, but their shape began in your repeated motions. Cases packed, cans sealed, oysters processed, hours worked. The ledger turns many hands into columns, and that is both useful and incomplete. It cannot show the cold rim against your thumb, or the way the steam thickened after lunch, or the careful pause before you rejected a dented can. Ledgers remember totals. Hands remember texture. As the cleanup deepens, the Baltimore Oyster cannery starts to sound larger. With fewer machines running, the walls return. The high ceiling holds echoes that were hidden before. Footsteps travel farther. A voice from the far room sounds closer than it is. Outside, the harbor noises come back through cracks and doors. Wagons, gulls, a motor turning over, a chain being dragged across wood. The world beyond the cannery has been there all along, waiting for the work to loosen its grip. You remove your apron carefully, because it is damp and likely to brush anything it touches. The cloth is heavier than at dawn, marked by the day's brine and tin dust. You may hang it where the house keeps such things, or fold it for washing, depending on the custom of the place. The relief of air against your clothes is small but noticeable. Your shoulders feel narrower without the apron. Your hands, freed from the bench, seem almost uncertain for a moment. The basin water runs over your fingers again. This washing is slower than the one before lunch. You work soap along the nails, over the knuckles, into the creases where the smell of oyster likes to stay. The water turns cloudy, then clearer. It cannot take everything. The day's scent will follow you into the street, faint but real, tucked under the soap and cold air. In Baltimore, plenty of people carry their trades home that way, in cloth, skin, and posture. Someone beside you talks about tomorrow's weather. Another person wonders whether the next shipment will be heavy enough to keep everyone busy. Seasonal work carries that quiet uncertainty, especially in a trade tied to beds, boats, markets, and winter water. You listen without answering at first, rubbing one thumb over the other until a dark mark lifts. Work gives people shared worries and shared silences. Both are allowed at the basin. The cannery does not empty all at once. Packing may still continue while cappers wash. A boiler may still breathe. A clerk may still finish paperwork under a lamp. Someone may stay to watch a final process or lock a storeroom. But your own station has crossed into afterwork. The bench is wiped. The caps are stored. The machine is still. The day's cans have left you. That separation feels plain and complete, though the building around you is not done. When you step nearer the door, the air changes before you reach it. The outside cold slips under the frame, sharper and drier than the room you are leaving. It smells of harbor mud, coal smoke, horse manure, gasoline, damp brick, and the wide evening beyond the packing house. Your lungs notice the difference. After hours of steam, the cooler air feels almost thin. You take it in slowly, as if your body must remember the city again. But we do not leave too quickly, because the Baltimore Oyster Capper's day still has its small transitions, and each one belongs to the work. There is the checking of pockets, the tying of a scarf, the search for a glove that has fallen behind a bench. There is the exchange of a few words with someone who walked in beside you before dawn and will walk out now with the same tired pace. There is the look back toward the room, not dramatic, only habitual, to make sure nothing of yours has been left behind. The place looks different when your task is finished. Larger, perhaps, and less personal. A light comes on near the packing area, yellow against the grey window. It makes the labels glow softly, and the cans awaiting crates throw small shadows on the table. The people still working there seem wrapped in another hour, while you stand at the edge of release. Every factory and cannery has these overlapping times. One person's day ends while another's continues. One machine rests while another starts. Work is not a single line, but a set of tides inside walls. You may pass the shell pile on your way out. In the cooler evening, its smell is chalkier and less warm than it was at midday. The shells are beautiful if you are tired enough to look without hurry. Rough grey outside, smooth white within, some edged with purple or brown. They make a faint sliding noise when a cart shifts them. Each shell was opened by a hand, and each oyster that came from it passed through rooms of rinsing, weighing, capping, heating, labeling, and packing. The pile is a record no one reads. The street outside the oyster house is damp underfoot. If it has rained, puddles hold the dim shapes of windows and wires. If it has not, the harbor still gives the bricks a darkened look. Your shoes carry a little of the cannery with them, salt and water in the seams. A streetcar bell rings somewhere beyond the warehouses, and the sound comes clear through evening air. The day has been full of metal sounds, but this one belongs to going home. Baltimore in the 1930s is not quiet in the way a country road is quiet. Its quiet comes in layers behind work. A wagon rolling away after loading, a shopkeeper pulling down a shade, a woman calling a child from a row house step, a steeple clock pressing its sound through smoke. The city is tired too, though it keeps moving. You move with it, part of the harbor's evening flow. One worker among many leaving mills, docks, foundries, laundries, markets, and packing houses. Your hands may feel oddly light without cans to hold. They swing at your sides, then tuck into pockets against the cold. The skin has softened from water, then tightened in the evening air. If you lift your fingers near your face, there is still oyster under the soap, mild and briny. It is not unpleasant anymore. It is simply evidence. The day has passed through you, and some small trace remains. We can walk a little with you. Not far. Just enough to feel the distance between the bench and the rest of life. Perhaps you live nearby, in a narrow brick row house where windows glow above the street. Perhaps you ride the streetcar, holding the strap with a tired hand while other workers sway beside you. Perhaps you stop for bread, or coal oil, or a small paper parcel from a shop where the clerk knows your face. The capper's wage becomes ordinary things almost at once. The workday follows you into those ordinary things. When you count coins, your fingers remember counting caps. When you lift a pot lid, your hand knows the roundness of a can. When steam rises from supper, some part of you thinks of the heating room. Industrial work does not stay in the factory as neatly as managers might wish. It enters gestures, sleep, appetite, and dreams. It changes the way a person listens to machines. Still, there is comfort in the return home, however plain. A chair receives your weight. Shoes come off one at a time. Wash water cools in a basin. The room may smell of cabbage, coffee, kerosene, soap, or coal heat. and these smells meet the oyster house scent still clinging to your sleeves. Someone may ask how the day went, and you may answer with a few words, because many working days do not need full telling. Busy enough, cold enough, same as yesterday. That may be all. Yet inside those few words, the whole day remains. Dawn at the wet floor, the first cold can, the stack of caps shining beside your wrist, the steady machine, lunch wrapped in paper, the afternoon light going grey, the careful rejection of a dented tin, the final washing of the bench. A person might call it ordinary, and they would not be wrong. But ordinary things become large when lived hour by hour. The next morning, we'll ask for the same work again if the oysters arrive and the orders hold. That is part of the rhythm too. A Baltimore oyster capper in the 1930s does not finish the trade in one day. You enter it, leave it, and enter it again. The bay changes, the weather changes, the load changes, the count changes, but the bench waits with recognizable patience. There is a kindness in work that can be found again, even when it is hard. And when another morning comes, the first signs of the oyster capper's day return before the sun has fully settled on Baltimore's harbor. The street is colder then, and the city feels rinsed by dark. You approach the cannery with other workers, each person carrying a small private weather of sleep, worry, and habit. The building shows itself first by smell, then by sound. Even before the doors open wide, there is the briny breath of yesterday's washing, the coal smoke starting up, and the dampness held in brick. A light burns somewhere inside, not bright enough to cheer, only enough to show the way in. Your station is where you left it. That matters more than it seems. The bench is clean enough, the machine still, the caps stored, the floor marked by old water stains that never quite disappear. You set down what you carry and begin the small preparations that make work possible. A rag is folded, a stack is moved, the handle is touched. The first few minutes belong to arrangement, and arrangement is the mind's way of entering the day without being startled. In Baltimore's oyster canneries, mornings depend on what the water and market have allowed. Some days the shell stock arrives in abundance, piled in barrels and baskets, making the receiving room loud with lifting and sorting. Some days the load is lighter, and workers read the size of their wages in the smaller number of shells. The Depression years do not make uncertainty gentler. They only make people more practiced at recognizing it. You look toward the receiving side and learn what kind of day may be coming. When the oysters are good and plentiful, the house fills quickly. Barrels thud against the floor, shells scrape, the shucking tables take on their grey-white mounds. Water runs more often, and the air sharpens with fresh liquor. You are not yet capping, but your part is already being prepared by hands across the room. Every opened shell is a future can. Every rinsed oyster moves the day closer to your bench. You wait with your station ready. The first cans reach you after the early rush of opening, washing, and measuring. They are colder than yesterday's final cans, as if morning itself has settled inside the tin. Your fingers close around the first one, and the old rhythm comes back more quickly than thought. Cap, seat, guide, release. The seamer turns. The sound returns to its familiar place in the room. It is not yesterday, but it knows yesterday's pattern. We can feel how repetitive work holds memory. The body stores what the mind would tire of describing. Your wrist remembers the angle. Your thumb remembers the pressure. Your feet remember where the board lies under the bench. Even the shoulders remember when to soften between motions. This is one reason such work can be restful to hear about, though it was not effortless to live. The routine carries itself after a while, like a song hummed under the breath. A new worker might be placed near the capping area and shown how to set lids. If that happens, your eye may notice the awkwardness kindly. Too much pressure at first. A lid pushed crooked. A hand left too near the moving parts. Someone corrects the motion with few words, because the room has no space for long speeches. You learn by seeing, trying, being corrected, and trying again. Skill enters quietly. often through embarrassment softened by repetition. The capper's task can look simple to anyone passing through once. Place a lid, close a can, move it along. But simplicity from a distance hides the number of judgments made each hour. You judge wetness, fullness, rim shape, lid condition, machine sound, pace, and the needs of the workers before and after you. You judge when to call someone and when to fix a small issue yourself. You judge how much speed the line can take without losing care. None of this is theatrical. It is work intelligence. Baltimore itself sits inside that intelligence. The city's canning trades were built from port access, rail connections, nearby harvests, and labor that could be called in season after season. Oysters were part of a larger world of seafood, vegetables, fruit and preserved goods moving through factories and markets. You may not speak of it that way at the bench, but the bench exists because the city knows how to receive raw things and send them away changed. The oyster capper's days follow the oyster season more than the calendar on the wall. Cold months bring the strongest association, the old saying about months with the letter R still living in ordinary talk, though trade and local practice have their own details. Winter work means cold hands, darker mornings, heavier clothes under aprons, and the welcome shock of steam. The oysters themselves seem to belong to that cold. Their liquor smells cleaner in it, like tide water under a hard sky. On a winter morning, the caps feel almost icy until the room warms. You may blow once into your hands before the line begins, though not over the open cans. You flex your fingers, touch the machine, and wait for the first tray. The building's old boards and bricks creak with temperature. A pipe knocks somewhere overhead. The first steam of the day rises from washing and heating, turning the air white in strips near the light. If the day is wet outside, workers arrive with collars darkened by rain. The harbor smell deepens, and the shell piles shine. Water beads on coats hung near the door, adding street damp to cannery damp. Your shoes bring in grit from the pavement. The bench remains your small dry order within a wet world. Though dry is only a relative word here. Tin must be kept clean. Lids must not be allowed to cling with moisture. Order is made one stack at a time. The can sizes may change during the day, and with them the feeling of the work. A smaller can moves quickly and sits neatly in the hand. A larger one has more weight and more surface to watch. The caps differ just enough that the body must adjust. You listen when the foreman says which run is next, or you learn from the trays themselves. A capper who reaches for the wrong lid loses time and may spoil the rhythm for several people. There are also differences in oyster grade, though your hands meet them after much of that sorting is done. Selects, standards, stewing oysters, smaller meats, larger meats, all these terms carry prices and expectations. The packers know how the can should look when filled. You know how it should look when ready to close. The buyer far away may know only the label. Between those levels of knowledge, the oyster passes through many quiet judgments. As the morning continues, a familiar tiredness begins again, but it does not arrive as an enemy. It is more like the weather of the job. Your fingers warm, then soften. Your shoulders settle into their working height. Your ears make peace with the noise. The first hour's sharp awareness gives way to a steadier attention, less bright, but more durable. You are not less careful. You are simply less new to the day. A worker nearby tells a story about a cousin finding work at a bakery, and the thought of warm bread moves through the cannery like a small kindness. Someone answers that bread work starts too early, as if oyster work does not. The talk fades under the machine. You smile perhaps, or perhaps only hear it, and keep moving. Humor in such rooms is rarely large. It is a shared easing of the load, small enough not to disturb the pace. You cap, seat, guide, release, and the stack lowers again. The repetition should not be mistaken for emptiness. Inside it, the mind can loosen knots. You may think through a household expense, remember a letter to write, hum a hymn, or follow no thought at all. The work permits a narrow drifting once the body has mastered its duty. Not too much drifting, never enough to miss a bad rim, but enough that the day can pass without striking every minute sharply. That is one mercy of routine. By late morning, the Baltimore oyster capper's bench has become the center of a small, steady current. Cans arrive from one side and leave by the other, and everything in between is your touch. The current is not fast like a river after rain. It is more like a canal lock working at its own deliberate rate, moving goods by patience and fit. You can feel the pressure from both directions. The packers needing space behind you, the heating and labeling rooms needing full trays ahead. Your bench is a hinge. The day swings through it. The physical shape of the bench matters. Its height decides how your back feels. Its surface decides whether cans slide or catch. Its distance from the machine decides whether your wrist works cleanly or strains. Factories are often described by their machines, but workers know the importance of inches. A shelf too far away can become an ache by afternoon. A footboard at the right height can save a person hour after hour. Comfort is rarely luxurious here. It is practical survival. You may bring small adjustments to the space if allowed. A folded cloth, a better place for the rag, a stack of caps turned slightly to suit your dominant hand, a bucket moved where it won't catch your shin. These are not acts of ownership in any official sense, but they make the station yours for the day. The body marks a workplace by arranging what it must touch. We can see this in every trade, from watchmen to typesetters to cappers beside the harbor. A quality man or foreman takes a few cans from the finished tray. He does not say much. He turns them, tests the seam, perhaps sets one aside for closer checking. His presence tightens the room only slightly, then passes. You keep working. If a seam is good, it needs no praise. If one is bad, the can returns with its problem made plain. Most days are held together by the hope that nobody has to stop the line for long. The oysters themselves have changed in your perception. At first they were food, perhaps, or shellfish from the bay. After hours and years, they are also material, something tender that must move through a hard system without losing its value. You know their softness by the way overfilled cans behave. You know their liquor by the ring it leaves. You know their fragility by how careful everyone must be before the lid closes. To work with food is to handle something both ordinary and perishable. There is responsibility in that, but not the kind that wakes the room with speeches. It is folded into routine. Wash the rim. Set aside the doubtful can. Keep the machine clean. Notice the smell. Close the seam properly. These acts repeat until they become a quiet ethic, a way of doing the next thing because it should be done that way. You may not call it pride, though pride may be present. You may simply call it not making trouble for the next person. At noon, the old cycle of washing and eating returns. The basin, the soap, the towel, the briny hands, the wrapped food, the short rest, the low talk. In a long week, lunches can blur together, but each one still matters because the body needs its pause. The floor under your feet has claimed hours from you, and a chair gives back a little mercy. You sit carefully, aware that standing again will be its own small negotiation. Maybe someone has brought oysters home too often and does not want to eat them at lunch. Maybe someone else still loves them fried crisp on Sunday, dredged in meal, served hot enough to burn the fingers. Work can change appetite in strange ways. The smell that feeds one person can weary another. You may pack oysters all day and come home wanting beans, bread, potatoes, anything that did not pass through the room with you. That, too, is part of the job. After lunch, the machines sound louder at first. Rest makes the ears briefly sensitive. Then the noise folds itself back into the day's fabric. You return to the bench, touch the stack of lids, and begin again. The first can after lunch always feels like a question. Will the afternoon be heavy, light, smooth, difficult, long, or mercifully even? The answer comes only by working through it. The line does not declare itself all at once. On some days, the afternoon brings a problem from upstream. Perhaps the shell stock was muddier than expected, and washing takes longer. Perhaps a batch contains too many small meats and must be sorted more carefully. Perhaps a delivery was delayed, compressing work that would rather have spread itself across the morning. Your bench feels these troubles as changes in flow. Too many cans at once. Not enough cans. Wet rims. Hasty filling. The capper becomes a listener to the whole process. You do what the role allows. You steady your pace when the line crowds. You refuse to rush the bad rim. You use pauses to prepare. You keep the machine clear. You speak when a repeated problem appears. The job is not control of the entire room. It is faithful attention to your crossing. There is relief in knowing the boundary. You cannot mend the weather, the market, or the bay. You can seat the next cap properly. And as another afternoon takes shape, the Baltimore oyster capper's life becomes less a single day than a pattern of days, each one similar, each one carrying its own small weather. A Monday has a different feeling from a Friday, even when the cans are the same size. Monday can begin stiffly, with sleep still heavy, and the week ahead unspent. Friday may carry the hidden arithmetic of wages, errands and relief. Midweek settles into endurance. The oyster season itself has larger moods too. Early days, heavy days, lean days, days when storms trouble the boats, days when a good load brings everyone into motion. You read these moods the way others read clouds. In Baltimore, the harbor never lets the industry forget its dependence on water. A fog can slow movement. Ice can make handling harder. Rain can turn streets and yards into dark, slick surfaces. Wind can change what boats risk and what arrives. Inside the cannery, the lights and machines may seem to make a world of their own, but every workday still begins somewhere outside, in tide, mud, shell, and weather. The oyster capper's bench is indoors, but it is not separate from the bay. The city also depends on the workers' bodies arriving day after day. Hands must come with enough warmth to move, eyes with enough rest to see, backs with enough strength to stand. There are no spare bodies hidden in the walls. If several people are sick, the room feels it. If a skilled worker leaves, the room must teach another. The system may look mechanical, but its steadiness is human. The machines do only what hands prepare them to do. You might have learned capping because someone in your family already worked in seafood, or because the cannery hired near the neighborhood, or because seasonal work was what could be found. Jobs come through need as often as choice. Yet once inside a trade, people make knowledge there. They learn which foreman is fair, which machine runs rough, which corner stays cold, which table gets the best light. They learn who will lend a coin, who will share a joke, who works silently and should be left in peace. The capper's work is sometimes solitary inside a crowd. You are surrounded by voices, but your attention narrows to the lid, the rim, the machine, the tray. That narrowness can be soothing. It gives the mind a small room to live in while the larger room clatters around it. You are not lonely exactly. You are held by the presence of others, while still keeping your own quiet station. Many factory workers know that feeling, together and private at once. Your days also carry the season's light. In winter, morning and evening may both be dark, so the cannery seems to occupy the whole bright middle of life. In spring, if work continues, the outside air changes first. It grows softer at the door, and the harbor smell opens a little. Light stays later on the bricks. Workers notice because anyone who spends long hours indoors becomes sensitive to what the windows offer. A longer evening can feel like a gift, even after a hard day. The oyster capper's clothes tell the story gradually. Aprons stiffened by washing, sleeves worn at the wrist, shoes shaped by damp floors, a scarf that smells faintly of smoke and brine. These things are not costumes. They are ordinary garments changed by use. At home they may be hung apart or washed with effort. The work enters cloth deeply, and a household can know a person's job before that person speaks. In working neighborhoods, many trades announce themselves this way. We come back to the bench because the bench is the center of our listening. The caps wait, the cans come, the machine turns. Your hand knows the small hover before the lid drops into place. That hover is almost nothing, but it contains judgment. Too early, and the lid skates. Too late, and the line backs up. Just right, and the can moves as if the work had always intended that shape. Routine is full of these nearly invisible timings. A capper also learns not to fight the whole day at once. You cannot cap an afternoon in advance. You cannot close tomorrow's cans today. You can only take the one before you, place the lid, and move it onward. The mind may wander toward rent, weather, or weariness, but the hands return to the present by necessity. There is a quiet lesson there, not preached, only repeated. One can, then one can, then one can. As the second afternoon in our remembering wears on, the light lowers again over Baltimore, and the capping bench waits for the day's last turn toward cleaning. The last turn toward cleaning comes softly at first, without anyone naming it. The trays thin out, the stacks of caps stand lower, and the room begins to divide itself between what must still be made and what can now be washed. You keep your hands in the working rhythm a little longer, because the Baltimore oyster capper's day does not end when the mind begins thinking of home. It ends only when the last needed lid has been seated true. A few cans still come from the packing side, delayed by some small correction upstream. Maybe they were held back for a weight check, or for a bit of shell found too late, or for liquor added to bring the fill right. You accept them without impatience. In a cannery, the late can has the same claim as the early one. Its rim needs the same wipe, its lid the same careful settling, its seam the same even pressure. Tired hands must still be trustworthy. The room's sound is changing now, becoming less like production and more like a place being gathered back into itself. The shucking knives stop in one corner, though another table keeps going. A wooden tub is dragged aside with a hollow scrape. Water runs longer at the basins. The heating room still breathes, but some of the steam has lost its urgency. Your own machine continues in brief turns, each one more noticeable because the other sounds have begun to fall away. There is a special tiredness that comes in the last hour. It is not the heavy tiredness of the middle afternoon, when the day still seems endless. This one has an edge of release in it. Your body knows it may soon rest, so every motion becomes both easier and harder. Easier because the end is near. Harder because the muscles, having learned that fact, begin to ask for what they have earned. You answer them by staying steady. A final tray is placed near you. The cans sit in it with their open tops dull in the low light, each one filled with oyster meat and liquor nearly to the proper line. The smell rises fresh and cold from them, even in the warmed room. You pull the caps close, align the first lid, and let the seamer take the can. Metal folds over metal with its familiar muted grip. One more closed can moves away from the open world. We can stay with this tray for a while, because the last batch often brings the whole day into focus. Each lid is like all the earlier lids, yet because there are fewer left, the mind notices them more clearly. You see the small scratches on the tin. You feel the damp edge of the can. You hear the rollers even hum and the soft stop at the end of its turn. A job repeated all day can become strangely vivid when it is almost finished. The next can has a bit of liquor on the rim. You take the rag, fold it to a cleaner place, and wipe once around. The cloth is warm from your hand and cool where wet. It leaves the rim bright. You set the lid down, and it sits flat, obedient to the circle beneath it. There is a quiet satisfaction in such a simple correction. Nothing is wasted, nothing is forced, and the work continues as though it had never hesitated. Across the room, crates are being stacked near the door. Their sides are marked with addresses, counts, brands, and the plain business of shipping. The wood looks dry against the wet room. Some crates will go to wholesalers, some to shops, some to rail connections, and some perhaps only across town. You may not know their destinations, but you know the step before them, before a label, before a crate, before a receipt. There is a sealed can in your palm. The oyster capper's place in Baltimore is modest, but it sits in a chain that reaches far beyond the bench. Watermen rise in darkness. Boats scrape docks. Dealers bargain. Barrels move. Shuckers open shells. Rinsers wash grit away. Packers measure. You cap. Steam rooms heat. Labelers smooth paper. Craters hammer wood. Drivers carry the finished goods into the city. Every link is ordinary when viewed up close, yet together they make a trade strong enough to shape streets and seasons. The last tray is halfway done. You can feel the room leaning toward silence. A worker begins rinsing the shucking table with long sweeps of water, and shells skitter toward a bucket. The sound is sharper now, because your machine pauses between cans. Someone laughs softly at the edge of the room, and the laugh fades quickly. absorbed by steam and brick. A foreman counts under his breath. A pencil taps twice against a board. The day is becoming countable. You close another can. The seam is clean. Another. The lid seats smoothly. Another. The machine catches slightly, then clears. You listen, adjust your pressure, and continue. This is no time to let tiredness make the motions coarse. If anything, the last cans ask for a slower inward attention, the kind that settles on the fingertips. The body may want to hurry toward washing up, but the work reminds you that finishing well is also part of rest. By the time the final can leaves your hand, the Baltimore Oyster Capper's bench has already begun to feel like a place after weather. The storm was not loud exactly, but it passed through in hours of damp air, tin, brine, voices, machine oil, steam, and repeated motion. Now the surface is scattered with evidence. A ring of oyster liquor has dried near one corner. A fleck of shell sits by the foot of the machine. The rag is gray with use. A few rejected caps wait to be returned or discarded. The board under your feet is darker where water has gathered. The station has kept the day's memory in marks. You stand still for a breath before cleaning. Not long enough for anyone to notice as idleness. Just long enough for your hands to stop expecting the next can. There is always a moment like that, when a repeated motion has ended, but the body continues listening for it. Your fingers hover slightly. Your shoulders remain set. Then the absence becomes clear. No more lids for now. No more rims. No more machine turns until the next run. You begin with the loose things. Unused caps are lifted carefully, because even at the end of the day, sharp edges remain sharp. Good lids return to their proper place, nested and covered from damp if the house requires it. Bad lids are separated. A stray can body is placed with others. The rag goes into rinse water. You move without drama, working from left to right, making order in the same direction the day flowed. It feels natural that way. The machine receives its wiping next. You clear the places where brine has touched metal, because salt is patient and will make its own damage if invited. The rollers, guards, handle, and base are treated according to what the machine allows and what the foreman expects. You do not take apart what is not yours to take apart. You clean what your work has marked. The smell of warm oil rises under the damp cloth, and the metal darkens briefly before the water dries. The bench follows. Hot water, soap, a stiff brush if one is nearby, and slow pressure from a tired arm. The brush makes a low rasp over the surface. Small bits loosen and slide toward the edge. Your sleeve darkens at the cuff. Steam touches your face again, and this time it feels less like the breath of production and more like the breath of release. Cleaning has its own rhythm, slower and broader than capping, with wider sweeps and fewer precise turns. We let the brush move back and forth because this is part of the sleep of the room. A surface that held the day's work is being cleared. The table that received brine becomes only a table again. The machine that turned for hours returns to stillness. The floor that caught drips is pushed toward the drain, and the drain accepts them with a patient sound. Work does not vanish, but its loose traces are gathered. The building exhales. Other workers clean around you. The shucking area takes longer, with shells, knives, boards, tubs, and heavier wash water. The smell there is stronger, more tidal, and the floor is rough with broken fragments. The packing side has paper scraps, paste brushes, crate straw or packing material, and pencil marks near the ledgers. Each area returns itself to readiness in its own way. A cannery at closing is a map of different kinds of labor being undone, just enough to begin again. The water in your bucket clouds quickly. It turns gray-white with shell dust and pale with oyster liquor. You carry it carefully, because the floor is slick and your arms have lost some patience. When you pour it toward the drain, the stream travels around old uneven spots in the concrete. No floor in such a place is perfectly level. Years of carts, boots, water, and repairs have given it a memory underfoot. You know where to step without thinking. A window is opened briefly, perhaps to clear steam, or let the air change. Evening comes through it, with a cold edge. The harbor beyond has turned blue-gray, and the smell outside is wider than the smell inside, carrying tide flats, smoke, wet wood, and the faint sourness of shell piles cooling in the open air. The cold touches your wrists above the washwater. It makes the skin wake for a moment. Then the window is lowered, and the room returns to itself. The Baltimore oyster capper's work is finished for the day, but the capper is not yet fully separate from it. You check the station once more. The good caps are away. The rag is accounted for. The machine is dry where it should be dry. The bench has no obvious scraps. The floor near your feet has been cleared enough that morning will not begin with yesterday's carelessness. This inspection is quiet, private, and almost tender. You are leaving the place as you would want to find it. The foreman may walk through at this point, not harshly if the day has gone well, only looking. His eyes pass over benches, machines, buckets, drains, doors, and workers preparing to leave. He lives in the totals and the condition of the room. You live more in the feel of the can rim and the ache in the thumb. Both views are partial. Together, they make the work possible, though not always equally comfortable. That is the plain truth of such places. When the apron comes off, the air meets your clothes differently. A string unties at your waist. A damp flap lifts away from your skirt or trousers. The cloth carries the day's chill, even if the room is warm. You hang it where it belongs, and it joins other aprons in a row, each one marked by labor. For a moment, they look like empty workers, waiting without complaint for morning. Then you turn back to your own hands. The wash basin is crowded at closing. People take turns without much ceremony. Sleeves are pushed higher. Soap is passed. Water splashes the front of the basin and runs to the floor. You scrub where the tin dust settles, where brine hides, where oil has made a dark crescent near the nail. The smell of soap is sharp at first, then softened by everything it tries to remove. Your hands look cleaner before they feel clean. The scent remains. Someone nearby mentions supper, and the word brings the whole outside world closer. Another person says the streetcar will be crowded if you wait too long. Someone else has to stop for lamp oil or bread. The talk is practical, but it opens little doors beyond the cannery. Kitchens, children, boarders, rooms above shops, row house steps, laundry, a letter waiting on a table. The capper's day is not only the hours at the bench, it is the way those hours press against everything after. You dry your hands on a towel rough from use. The cloth catches slightly on chapped places, and you flex your fingers afterward. They are not quite your evening hands yet. They still belong to tin and water. It will take time, warmth, perhaps supper, perhaps sleep, before they return fully. Workers know this quiet delay. The body does not cross the threshold as quickly as the feet do. Some part of the job walks home inside the muscles. And as you step toward the door, the 1930s Baltimore Oyster House behind you dims into another kind of workplace, one watched by cleaners, clerks, and the last low lamps. The street receives you with a cooler breath. The first inhalation outside is always distinct, even when the harbor air is not exactly clean. It is broader than the cannery air, mixed with coal smoke, water, horses, damp brick, gasoline, iron, and cooking from nearby houses or shops. Above the rooflines, the evening sky is dull and low. Lights come on in warehouse windows. A gull moves as a pale shape over the wharf, silent from where you stand. Your shoes make a damp sound on the pavement. They have carried bits of shell dust and cannery water, though you may have wiped them before leaving. The street itself is no cleaner than the workroom, only differently so. Mud gathers near the curb. Wagon tracks hold thin water. A truck idles rough near a loading door. Its engine smells sharp after hours of brine. Somewhere, a streetcar bell rings again, patient and metallic. The city offers its own machinery for the ride home. If you walk, your pace is slower at first, because the legs must remember distance after standing in place. At the bench you shifted weight more than you traveled. Now the hips and knees take the work. The hands stay in pockets if the evening is cold, curled around their own warmth. You pass other workers leaving other buildings, each one carrying a trade invisibly. Flour on a sleeve. Coal dust at a collar. Printer's ink near a thumb. Oyster brine in the skin. Baltimore's neighborhoods near the harbor hold the sounds of labor ending and domestic life beginning. Doors open. Supper pans knock against stoves. Children run until called back. A woman shakes a cloth from a step. Men compare notes on work in low voices, not because the details are secret, but because tired people do not spend words lavishly. You move through all of it with the Kappa's day still close behind you. The bench may be blocks away, but its rhythm continues faintly. A streetcar ride changes the body differently. If you take one, you climb aboard with other workers, find a place to stand or sit, and let the car's motion replace the machine's motion. The floor trembles underfoot. The windows hold fogged patches from breath. Advertisements ride above the seats, bright and ordinary, promising soap, shoes, medicine, or a show you may not afford. The bell rings at corners. Your hand grips a pole and the fingers curl slowly stiff from the day. In the car, the oyster smell around you becomes one smell among many. Wool coats damp from weather. Tobacco, hair oil, paper, metal dust. Cold air every time the door opens. No one needs to ask where anyone has been. The city carries many odors at quitting time, and people accept them because their own work has an odor too. The Kappa's brine belongs among them. Not glamorous, not shameful, simply present. It is the scent of wages earned near the water. You might close your eyes for part of the ride, not sleeping fully, only letting the street sounds soften. The clack of wheels over track joints has its own rhythm, not so different from factory repetition. It carries the mind without asking much. In that half-rest, the day returns as fragments. A lid slipping, a good seam, hot water over wrists, the foreman's pencil, the stack lowering, the smell of paste. These fragments do not demand attention. They drift and settle, at home, whatever form home takes. The first tasks are ordinary. Hang the coat, put aside lunch wrappings, wash again if water is ready, warm your hands near the stove if there is heat enough to spare. The room may be small, but after the cannery it feels arranged around different needs. Chairs, plates, lamps, bedding, mending, a shelf of cups. None of it is idle. Domestic life is another workshop, quieter perhaps, but full of repetitive care. Your hands may be asked for more work even after the cannery. Potatoes to peel, buttons to fasten, a child to lift, coal to bring up, water to carry. A wage earner's rest is often braided with household tasks. Still, the motions differ from capping, and that difference can be restful. A spoon is not a tin lid, a cup is not a seaming machine. Warm dishwater is not cold oyster liquor. The body knows the distinction and softens around it. Supper after such a day tastes stronger, because the senses have been used so long. Bread feels dry and comforting. Coffee smells dark and human. Potatoes hold heat in their centers. Meat, if there is meat, carries fat and salt. If oysters appear on the table, perhaps because they are affordable through the trade or brought home by arrangement, you meet them differently from a customer. You know the rooms behind them. You know how quickly freshness becomes work. There may be no long conversation about the day. That is not because the day had no meaning. It is because much of its meaning was physical, and physical knowledge does not always want sentences. You might say the line ran heavy, or the machine behaved, or the oysters were small, or the foreman was cross. Then, the talk moves on. A bill, a neighbor, a child. The weather, the Kappa's work retreats from speech, but it remains in the hands resting near the plate. When evening deepens, fatigue changes texture. The sharp ache of standing becomes a dull warmth. The fingers stop tingling. The back loosens if the chair is kind. The smell of the cannery fades under stove heat, soap, and sleep, though never completely. Your body begins preparing for another morning without asking permission. It will remember the way to the bench. It will wake before it wants to. It will reach for the day's first arrangements almost automatically. And while the city settles, the oyster house by the harbor holds the cleaned machines in darkness, waiting for another tide of hands. In the night, the cannery is not empty in the imagination. It holds the aftersounds of the day. Water in a drain, a pipe contracting as it cools, the faint creak of wood in a crate stack, the smell of brine resting in cracks no brush can reach. The capper's machine is still, its rollers no longer shining with motion, its handle cool again. Tomorrow, a palm will warm it. Tomorrow, the first lid will settle. For now, it waits. Baltimore around it also waits, though never entirely asleep. The harbor keeps moving in the dark. Water touches pilings with small sounds. Ships and smaller boats shift against their lines. A watchman may pass with a lantern or flashlight, making his own slow round through warehouses and yards. Streetcars grow fewer, then return before dawn. Somewhere bread is being baked, somewhere coal is being shoveled. The city rests by portions, not all at once. For the oyster capper, sleep may come with the day's rhythm still repeating softly. Cap, seat, guide, release. Not as a command now, but as an echo. The mind, loosening its hold, may turn the machine's roll into the streetcar's clatter. The streetcar's clatter into rain, the rain into shells sliding outside the door. Working dreams often borrow the shapes of repeated motions. They are not stories so much as continuations, softened by sleep. If morning comes cold again, the whole cycle begins under a gray sky. The alarm, the stove, the dressing in dim light, the careful saving of time. You enter the street with breath showing. Other workers appear from doors along the block, some walking in the same direction, some turning toward mills, shops, offices, or docks. The city gathers its labor before it gathers its brightness. The oyster capper is one thread in that gathering, plain and necessary. At the cannery door, the smell meets you first, stronger after the open air. It is yesterday and today together. Scrubbed surfaces, salt, damp wood, cold tin, smoke, and the faint promise of fresh shell stock. You step inside, and the outside world narrows to the room's demands. Coat hung, apron tied, hands checked, bench approached. The routine receives you without ceremony, and in a way that is its own mercy. You do not have to invent the day. The day is already shaped. Fresh oysters have arrived earlier than you did, or perhaps just as you came in. Their shells carry mud from beds and bars, and their rough edges knock together in baskets. They are not yet the neat meats that will reach your cans. They are heavy, irregular, and cold, each one closed around a little salt world. The shuckers take them up with practiced hands. The first knives enter hinges. The first shells open. The first liquor runs pale into pans. You are not the shucker today, but you depend on that rhythm. The capping bench waits downstream, and waiting has its own usefulness. You arrange lids by size. You check the rag. You look at the machine. You may test its motion before work begins, listening for roughness. The room's early quiet allows such sounds to stand out. A squeak, a drag, a looseness. Anything that might become trouble later. Better to learn it now than during a rush. The first open cans may be delayed by sorting. That is all right. You stand with hands resting lightly near the bench, watching the room gather speed. There is pleasure in readiness when no one is yet pressing. The caps are stacked. The path is clear. The machine is clean. The floorboard is where your feet expect it. A capper's morning confidence is not loud. It is simply the knowledge that the station will not betray you through neglect. When the first filled cans arrive, they bring the bay nearer to your side of the room. The oysters glisten in the liquor, folded and soft, with a color somewhere between pearl, gray, and cream. A faint chill rises from them. You check the fill, wipe where needed, and set the first lid. The machine turns, and the day begins in earnest. It is a small beginning, hardly visible to anyone beyond the bench, but your body recognizes it. Work has crossed the threshold. The early pace may be uneven. One tray, then a pause. Two trays, then a longer wait. The shucking side is finding its own speed, and the packers are matching portions to cans. You use the gaps to place the next stack closer and to watch the finished seams from the first few cans. The machine has warmed slightly. The handle feels less hostile to the palm. Your fingers, stiff from mourning, begin to obey more quickly. In a Baltimore oyster cannery of the 1930s, Much depends on cooperation without elaborate conversation. A worker passes behind you and says only, "Coming through." Another sets a tray down and nods toward a can that may need watching. A foreman gestures rather than calls across the room. The noise teaches brevity, but brevity does not always mean coldness. People learn to put care into small signs. A nod can carry enough meaning for the next 5 minutes. The caps themselves have been made elsewhere, stamped and cut to fit the can bodies. You might never see that factory, though its precision visits your hand all day. If the batch is good, each lid separates neatly and sits true. If the batch is good, each lid separates neatly and sits true. Industrial labor often depends on invisible strangers doing their part before you ever begin. When their work is right, you barely think of them. When it is wrong, your thumb knows at once. You close another can, the seam looks right, another follows. Your shoulders settle, the room's early chill gives way to activity, steam moves along the ceiling, the floor grows wet in familiar places, a stack of shell baskets near the door rises, then disappears. The day, which felt separate in its first minutes, becomes continuous with many days before it. We are inside the long pattern now, where the oyster capper's life is measured less by events than by textures repeated. A visitor might come through the cannery sometimes. A buyer, an inspector, an owner, or someone from an office who does not stand in damp rooms often. Such people look carefully, or pretend not to look too carefully. They notice steam, rows of workers, cans, labels, crates, and perhaps the speed of the shuckers. They may not understand your station's small judgments. That is often true of quiet jobs. The necessary part is easy to miss, because it is not loud. If an inspector is present, the room may become tidier in its movements. Not cleaner exactly, because it should already be clean enough, but more aware of being seen. Hands stay careful. Surfaces are wiped promptly. Questionable cans are set aside with visible decisiveness. Food work carries public trust, and trust has rules, forms, and visits. Yet the deepest cleanliness is still in habit. No inspection can replace the worker who notices a dirty rim before the lid descends. The oyster capper's attention moves between near and nearer. The near is the tray, the stack, the machine, the finished cans. The nearer is the rim itself, the tiny line where lid and body must meet. Your eyes go there again and again. The world beyond may be wide, but the work's world contracts to a circle a few inches across. There is calm in that contraction. It does not deny the larger world. It gives you one place to meet it. The morning advances, and the line steadies. Now the trays arrive with enough regularity that waiting disappears. Your left hand reaches for caps while your right hand brings cans forward, or the reverse if that is how your body works. The machine's action becomes part of the arm's expectation. The sound of a good seam blends with the motion of moving the can onward. Thought loosens. Attention remains. This is the balance many repetitive jobs require, and it is easier to feel than explain. A draft moves along the floor, cold around the ankles. Above it, the room is warm with steam. The difference travels through you all day. Feet cold, face damp, hands alternately chilled by cans and warmed by machinery. Clothing never settles into one comfort. The body makes its adjustments. A shifted stance, a rolled sleeve, a tucked scarf, a hand briefly rubbed against the other. None of it stops the work. It simply accompanies it. You may keep track of time by the way hunger appears. At first it is only a light space in the body. Then coffee from someone's cup smells stronger. Then the wrapped lunch in your mind becomes almost visible. Still, there are cans to close before noon. You do not rush them. Hunger is familiar, and familiar things can wait a little. The oysters cannot wait open too long. The line needs the capper's steadiness more than the stomach needs immediate relief. By the time lunch comes again, the Baltimore oyster capper's hands have repeated the morning into a kind of quiet knowledge. The basin water stings a little at first, not from heat but from chapped skin meeting soap. You wash anyway, working slowly around each nail. The smell of brine lifts as the water runs over your fingers. A little grey gathers near the drain. Other workers stand close, shoulders almost touching, making room in the way people do when space has always been limited. No one needs to apologize for needing the basin. Everyone does. Lunch is unwrapped with practical care. Paper is smoothed and saved if clean enough. A jar is opened. A cup is filled. The first bite brings the body back to itself. In the cannery, the appetite is not leisurely, but it is real. You chew while listening to talk move around you. Weather again. Rent again. A cousin. A market. A preacher. A sore wrist. A new pair of shoes bought second hand. Repetition lives in conversation too, and it comforts as much as it wearies. Maybe someone mentions the bay, not as scenery, but as condition. Too much rain changes the water. Cold affects handling. Closed grounds, poor catches, or disputes over beds can mean thin work. People who process oysters may never see the exact place each one was dredged or tongued, yet they live under the consequences of those places. The capper's bench is far from the oyster bar and close to it at once. The distance is geographic. The dependence is immediate. The lunch pause also reveals how tired everyone is. Shoulders drop, hands rest open, voices lower after the first few minutes. Someone leans back against a wall and closes their eyes without quite sleeping. Another person massages the base of a thumb. These gestures are not complaints. They are maintenance, like oiling a machine or rinsing a table. Workers learn to repair themselves in small increments because the day rarely grants large ones. Then the pause ends, and the room resumes with less ceremony than it stopped. Paper is folded. Cups are set aside. Apron strings are tightened. The machine waits with the patience of an object that has no memory of fatigue. You return to it carrying your own memory of the morning. The first afternoon can is always slightly heavier than expected, though it is no different from the others. The body has cooled in rest, and the work must warm it again. The afternoon may bring a run of a different size or order. You change caps accordingly, checking the fit before trusting the stack. A lid that belongs to another size can look nearly right in low light, but nearly is not enough. The rim will tell the truth. You test, seat, listen, and continue. The change keeps the mind awake in a gentle way, not startled, not excited, only returned to attention by difference. In the labeling area, paper colors shift as orders change. A blue label for one buyer, a red bordered one for another, perhaps plain stock for a wholesaler who will mark it later. Labels are a kind of clothing for the cans, but the metal underneath is what matters to you. A pretty label cannot mend a poor seam. A good seam can sit under any paper. The capper's pride, if we call it that, lives under the visible surface. The afternoon work asks for endurance rather than freshness. You have already proven you can begin. Now you prove you can continue. The room's air grows fuller. The floor shines. The cap stacks lower. Your fingers may feel puffy from dampness, and the skin at the side of the thumb may be tender. You adjust your grip again. A small change can carry you through another hour. This is how workers survive long repetition, by finding tiny savings. The machine's voice becomes almost companionable. You know when it is content. You know when it complains. A smooth run has a rounded sound, a kind of contained turning. A poor seat makes a harder note. A piece of grit gives a catch. You are not listening with the drama of alarm, but with the steady listening given to a stove, a baby, a horse or rain on a roof. Ordinary sounds tell you what needs care. There are moments when your eyes lift from the bench and find the window. Outside, clouds pass over the harbor, and the light changes on wet brick. A gull lands on a roofline and stands there, indifferent to ledges and seams. Smoke from a stack bends with the wind. The glimpse lasts only a few seconds, but it widens the room. Then the next tray arrives, and the view narrows again to tin, oyster, lid and hand. By mid-afternoon, the oyster capper's work in Baltimore has become a long conversation between sameness and small change. Sameness keeps the line alive. The same place for caps, the same turn of the wrist, the same check of the seam, the same motion into the finished tray. Small change keeps the worker awake. A wetter can, a colder batch, a rougher lid, a faster packer, a pause from the heating room, a foreman's glance. The job is not mechanical in the way outsiders might imagine. It is a human steadiness applied to materials that never repeat themselves exactly. The oysters are living things made into goods, and their irregularity remains even after sorting. Some are plump and folded, some thinner, some darker at the edge, some pale as cream. Their liquor shines differently depending on the batch. Their smell changes subtly with origin, weather, and freshness. You may not analyze this formally, but your senses take it in. The capper's world is full of information that arrives through texture and scent before it reaches words. A small spill runs toward your side of the bench. You lift the caps away before moisture reaches them, then wipe the path clean. The action is quick, but not sharp. Wet caps cling, and clinging caps slow everything. One accident teaches many precautions. You have learned to keep dry things just far enough from wet things, clean things just far enough from scraps, and useful things close enough that the arm does not waste itself. The bench is arranged knowledge. Someone brings more lids from storage, wrapped or boxed to keep them clean. The new stack is brighter, edges crisp and cold. You add it to your station, feeling the renewed height under your fingers. A full stack can make the afternoon seem longer, but it also means work continues, and work continuing can be welcome when wages depend on hours. Feelings around abundance are never simple in seasonal trades. More oysters mean more labor. More labor means more pay. More pay means more tiredness. The capper's relationship with time is shaped by that truth. A light day may spare the body and trouble the pocket. A heavy day may strain the wrist and steady the household. So you learn not to wish too strongly in either direction. You take the day delivered by boats, orders, weather, and management, and you work through its particular demands. The old phrase, making do, is not passive here. It is active, practiced, and full of small decisions. A brief pause comes when the packers behind you change bins. You straighten, roll your shoulders once, and look down at your hands. The fingers are reddened, not dramatically, just enough to show use. A faint line marks where the edge of the can often rests. You rub that place with your thumb, then stop as the next tray arrives. The body asked a question, and the work answered by returning. So you continue. The next batch is smooth. Cans filled cleanly, rims wiped well before reaching you, lids fitting without argument. Such stretches feel like a blessing no one announces. The line becomes almost graceful. Each worker's task meets the next without snagging. The shuckers keep pace, packers fill neatly, you cap cleanly, heating receives steady trays, and the packing room does not call back mistakes. A factory can have moments of harmony. They are built from many people not making trouble for one another. We stay in that harmony gently. The machine turns. The cans pass. Your breathing aligns with motion. The room remains damp, loud, and tiring, but within it there is order enough to rest the mind. Sleep scripts love quiet places, but some working quiet is hidden inside noise. It is the quiet of knowing what to do next. It is the quiet of a hand returning to a familiar tool. It is the quiet of the next cap fitting as it should. Then a rougher stretch comes, as it always does. A tray arrives with several wet rims, and you slow just enough to wipe them. Another can has a bent lip. A lid sticks to the one below it, and you separate them with a fingernail. The machine gives a harder note, so you check the seating carefully. Nothing dramatic happens. No one stops the room. The work simply becomes more attentive for a while, and your focus gathers closer. This alternation is part of the oyster capper's day. Smoothness, then correction. Flow, then pause. Good fit, then doubtful edge. The mind that expects only ease becomes irritated, but the worker's mind expects variation. You do not take it personally when tin resists or a batch comes wet. You meet the condition that arrives. A lid does not care whether you are tired. A rim does not become true because the hour is late. So the hands remain patient. As the afternoon moves toward its last third, the gray light in the Baltimore cannery thickens, and the work begins again to lean toward evening without yet reaching it. The evening remains a promise rather than a fact, and promises can make the last hours feel wider than the earlier ones. You know the light has lowered, and you know the bench is not as full as it was, but the cans still arrive with their small claims on your attention. The Baltimore oyster capper's work narrows again to rim, lid, seam, and tray. The body may be thinking of home, but the hands must stay in the room. This is the part of the day when mistakes like to appear quietly. A cap lifted too fast may bring another clinging beneath it. A can set down a little crooked may enter the machine wrong. A damp rag used past its usefulness may spread more than it cleans. You have learned to slow just enough at the edge of tiredness, not enough to delay the line, but enough to keep the work honest. Endurance has its own careful pace. The cannery's warmth has changed again. Earlier, it came from waking boilers and gathering people, then from the middle hours of full production. Now it feels stored, as though the brick, metal, tables, and floor have taken the day into themselves. Steam still rises, but the room also gives back heat from every surface. Your sleeves feel heavy. The back of your neck is damp, yet the cans remain cool enough to remind you of water far outside the building. A worker from the receiving side passes with an empty basket, and the smell of shells follows him. It is chalky, raw, and tidal, different from the more delicate smell of oyster meats in the tins. That smell takes you back to the beginning of the line, where the shells arrive closed and rough, wearing mud like old weather. You do not work there today, but you feel connected to it. Every cap you set belongs to a shell that had to be opened by another hand. In the 1930s Baltimore Oyster House, labor is divided by tasks, but the day itself is shared. The person who unloads barrels feels the weight before you feel the rim. The shucker meets the hinge before you meet the can. The washer meets grit before you meet liquor. The packer judges fullness before you judge the lid. A good day depends on all of these quiet meetings going well enough, again and again, until the finished crates stand near the door. A tray comes to you with the oysters sitting neatly below the lip. You can tell the packer is having a good stretch. The rims are clean, the liquor level even, the cans set in the tray without slosh. Your own work becomes easier because someone else's care has reached you. You settle the caps one after another, feeling the line smooth itself out. That is one of the gentlest pleasures of factory work. When another person's good habits arrive in your hands, the seaming machine answers with the same soft press each time. The sound is compact, almost private, even while the room around it stays busy. A can goes in open and comes out ready to travel. This transformation is so quick that it might seem minor, but your wrist knows the value of it. Open food is vulnerable, closed food has begun its journey. Between those states is a ring of folded metal, made right by pressure and placement. The labels waiting elsewhere may promise freshness and Chesapeake flavor, but they cannot show the work of sealing. They cannot show your thumb wiping the last trace from a rim. They cannot show the way your ear listened for the machine's rough note. They cannot show how the lid sat flat because you stopped it from sitting crooked. Work often disappears beneath packaging. We are not trying to make it grand. We are only letting it be seen. Outside, the harbor light is fading into pewter. Through the filmed window, the sky has lost color, and the buildings across the way have become darker shapes. The street noise changes too. Delivery sounds mix with leaving sounds. Wheels still turn, but some are headed home instead of toward work. A gull's call comes thinly through the wall, then disappears under a hammer from the crate room. The city and the cannery answer each other without meaning to. You cap another row. The stack of lids lowers by the width of a finger. That is how time passes at the bench, not by drama, but by measurable lessening. Less in the stack, more in the finished tray. Less light at the window, more ache in the wrist. Less talk near the shucking table, more sweeping near the drain. The day leaves evidence in subtraction and accumulation, both at once. A clerk comes through with papers held high to keep them dry. His cuffs are cleaner than yours, though he has his own burdens in ink, arithmetic, and responsibility. You see him pause near the packing room, check a crate mark, and compare it with a sheet. His work turns cans into shipments on paper. Your work turns filled tins into things that can be counted. Neither task is complete alone. The oyster trade is a chain of different kinds of certainty. If the cannery pays by piece for some tasks and by hour for others, the room carries those differences in mood. Shuckers may think in counts and speed, while cappers may feel the pace through the line's demand and the day's length. Pay arrangements vary by house, season, and job, and workers know them more intimately than outsiders do. You know what your own labor means in wages, and you know how a slow day can follow you home. Money is never far from the bench, even when no coins are visible. Yet there is also a part of the mind that stops counting. It happens when the motion becomes steady enough that numbers would only tire you. The hands take over, and the day becomes texture instead of arithmetic. Tin edge, damp cloth, warm handle, cool can, wet floor, the smell of brine, the sound of a tray set down. This is not escape from work. It is another way of inhabiting it, closer to the senses than to the ledger. And as the last full run of the afternoon reaches your station, the Baltimore oyster capper's bench grows briefly crowded before it can grow calm. The trays arrive close together, and for several minutes, your world is full again. You bring the lids nearer, clear space for finished cans, and set your feet firmly on the board. The work is not frantic, but it tightens. You reduce every motion to what it needs to be. No extra glance, no wasted reach, no thought lingering longer than useful. The body that has been trained by many ordinary hours now offers back its training, and the line holds. A wet rim appears, and you wipe it. A cap sticks, and you separate it. A can wobbles, and you reseat it. These corrections happen inside the flow, like small stones under a stream. The finished cans still move onward, and the stack still lowers. You do not need to speak unless a problem repeats. Quiet competence is sometimes only the absence of interruption. The room may not notice when you prevent trouble, but the room benefits from it. The heating room calls for the next tray. A worker lifts the finished cans, and the metal clinks softly against itself. The sound is different from empty cans. Filled and sealed, they have a denser note, rounder and more final. You hear it as they leave, and then you turn back to the open ones still waiting. There is always a moment when finished work and unfinished work are both within reach. Your hands choose the unfinished, because that is where they are needed. The caps in your stack are no longer perfectly aligned. The rush has made them lean slightly, like coins in a worn purse. You straighten them during a brief breath between trays. The edges click together. The motion is small, but it restores order to the station. A tidy stack saves effort, and saved effort matters more near the end of the day. Workers do not arrange things neatly only for appearance. They do it because disorder costs the body. The light over the bench may come from bulbs now more than windows. Electric light makes tin look flatter, less moonlit, more workmanlike. Shadows gather under the machine. The lids reflect the bulb as a dull pale spot. Your eyes adjust, though they may feel dry from steam and focus. You blink, wipe your wrist across your forehead if your hands are clean enough, and continue. The day has moved from natural light to factory light, without asking permission. In the capping work, seeing is never enough by itself. The eye can miss what the finger catches. A lid may look right and still rock slightly under touch. A seam may look complete until the nail finds a raised place. A can may seem fine until its weight tells you something is wrong. So you use every sense allowed by the work. Sight, touch, hearing, smell, and the body's memory all sit at the bench with you. They make one quiet instrument. A worker asks for a little room to pass, and you lean back without taking your hand from the next can. The passage between stations is narrow, and everyone knows how to bend around one another. Bodies in a cannery learn the shape of shared space. You step aside, reach over, wait, turn, and resume. These movements are not formal politeness, but they are a form of care. No one can work well if everyone behaves as though alone. The last full run eases. It does not stop, only loosens. The trays arrive farther apart. The shucking room has fewer shells waiting. and the packers begin clearing their immediate surfaces. You can hear the difference in voices. People begin to speak in slightly longer phrases because the machine noise has thinned. Someone asks whether a certain crate has gone. Someone answers from the far side. The whole room begins to think beyond the next few minutes. You close a can and place it with the finished group. The seam shines briefly under the bulb. Another can follows, then another. The stack of caps is low enough now that you bring a new partial stack forward, just in case the count asks for it. You have learned not to assume the day's end too soon. Nothing is more wearying than having to hunt for supplies when everyone thought the work was done. The foreman checks the count and speaks with the packers. You do not strain to hear, but the room's attention bends that way. A few more cans are needed, not many, enough to keep you at the bench. You take the partial stack, place it within reach, and ready your rag. The small extension of work is accepted with a breath. The body may sigh, but the hands return. Work has a way of continuing past the first imagined ending. Those last few cans arrive almost shyly. They sit in a small tray, not enough to belong to the rush, too many to ignore. You give them the same care. The first lid sets smoothly, the second needs wiping. The third has a clean rim and closes with a fine sound. The fourth catches, so you pause and check it. The delay is brief, and the seam is made right. No one will know which can was nearly troublesome. That is fine, the capper knows. When the tray is done, the worker who takes it nods. Perhaps that is all. A nod can close a day as surely as a bell. You look at the bench, at the remaining lids, at the rag, at the machine. This time no new tray appears immediately. The space after work opens again, but cautiously. You wait a little, because experience has taught you that silence may be temporary. The room gathers itself. Then the cleaning begins in earnest. And as the machines quiet one by one, the Baltimore oyster capper's work turns from sealing food to restoring the place that sealed it. The first sound of cleaning is water. It is always water. It runs from taps, pours into buckets, splashes across tables, and travels along the floor toward drains that have taken the day's offerings without complaint. Water rinses oyster liquor, shell dust, tin dust, oil smears, bits of paper, and the unnameable dampness that gathers wherever food and labor meet. You hear it under the last machine sounds, then over them until washing becomes the room's main voice. You begin at the station again, not because the station is large, but because it is yours for the day. The machine is still warm. The bench is marked. The caps must be handled dry. You sort what remains, return usable lids, and set aside anything bent or suspect. Your fingers, tired as they are, still know the difference. Even at cleanup, the work asks for judgment. Not every leftover thing is waste. Not every shiny thing should be trusted. A brush waits in a pail, its bristles stiff and darkened by use. You dip it, shake off the excess, and bring it to the bench. The first strokes release the smell of soap and old brine together. It is a clean smell, but not delicate. It belongs to places where surfaces must be made ready again by effort. You scrub along the edge where liquid gathers, around the base of the machine, and across the worn place where your wrist rested. The brush sound is low and steady. Hot water makes steam around your hands. The warmth enters sore fingers and seems to open them slightly. There is relief in that. All day the hands have done precise small work, and now they make broader motions. Wipe, rinse, wring, scrub, push. The muscles change their task. Your body may welcome the variety, even though it is still labor. Repetition has many forms, and cleaning is the final one of the day. Nearby, shuckers clean knives with care. A shucking knife is simple, but it is personal in the way useful tools become personal. Handles wear to the hand. Blades dull and are sharpened. A poor knife makes the wrist work harder. You can hear metal against stone or metal against basin edge. Soft and practical. The knives will rest until morning, but not before they are made ready. Every job has its ending ritual, and each ritual is shaped by the tool. The oyster capper's machine does not belong to you in the same way a personal knife might, yet you know its moods. You wipe the feed area and the places where splash is dry. You clear around the base. If any part needs attention beyond cleaning, you leave word or tell the person responsible. A machine ignored at night becomes a problem at dawn. The morning worker and the evening cleaner are often the same person, so care for tomorrow is also care for yourself. The floor around the bench is swept toward the drain. Shell chips, paper bits, and grey water move together in a slow line. Your broom bristles rasp over the concrete, catching in old cracks. You lean into the handle with a steady pressure. This work has a different sound from capping, broader and rougher. It asks more from the shoulders than the fingers. A final wash follows, thinning the smell of the day and leaving the floor dark and shining. The room cools as doors open and steam thins. Outside air reaches farther inside now, slipping around ankles and under tables. You feel it through damp clothing. The warmth that seemed heavy an hour ago becomes something you might miss. Workers move a little faster in the cold, not rushed, only eager to finish before chill settles into wet sleeves. The oyster house becomes less a place of production and more a place of closing. A worker carries out a pail of scraps. Another stacks empty tubs. Someone counts unused cans. Someone covers supplies. Someone else checks that no food remains where it should not. The actions overlap without much speech. Everyone knows the closing pattern because it repeats daily, though the details vary. One person missing can change the balance, and others adjust. A cannery at cleaning time is a practiced choreography, but no one would call it that while holding a broom. The smell of paste from the labeling area lingers even after the brushes are washed. It mingles with wet paper and wood. Labels that were not used are stacked away from moisture, because paper is fussy in a wet trade. Crates are swept free of scraps. Hammers are set where they can be found. The packing side grows orderly in its own dry, papery way, while your side remains metallic and damp. Different rooms have different kinds of cleanliness. The day's paperwork continues after many hands are washed. Counts must match shipments. Orders must be marked. Wages may be noted. Supplies may be tallied for the next run. You may see the clerk's lamp through the dimming room, a small yellow circle over ledgers. His pen or pencil keeps moving after your machine is still. It is another quiet job, less wet perhaps, but not without fatigue. Numbers can tire a person differently than tin. You are near the basin again. This washing feels final. Soap moves over the same skin that has met metal all day. You rub gently around tender places, because there is no need to punish hands that have done their work. The water runs clouded at first, then clear enough. A faint smell remains. It may remain until sleep. In the morning, after dressing and walking through harbor air, the smell will meet its own source again, and the cycle will close. As you dry your hands, the towel scratches lightly. Chapped skin catches. You flex your fingers, not for speed now, but to feel them as your own. Around you, people begin dressing for the outside. Scarves tied, hats found, coats buttoned, lunch tins gathered. The transformation from worker to street pedestrian is gradual and incomplete. Aprons come off, but posture still carries the bench. Hands are clean, but trade remains in the nails. The room releases you only partway at first. The Baltimore Oyster capper steps out of the clean station and into the doorway of evening, where the city waits with smoke and cold and ordinary errands. The doorway is a narrow border between climates. Behind you, soap, brine, steam, oil, and damp concrete. Before you, cold air, street smoke, wet stone, and the open smell of the harbor. You pause only if traffic or another worker makes you pause. The outside air touches your face with a firmness that feels almost like a cloth wrung in cold water. It clears the lungs after the cannery, though it brings its own grit and smoke. The street may be crowded with other departures. Workers from neighboring businesses step out at nearly the same time, each one joining the evening stream. Their voices are low, shoulders bent slightly against the weather. A truck rattles past with empty crates or full ones, its tires cutting through damp grit. Somewhere a horse exhales a white cloud. The old and new kinds of hauling share the street uneasily, but both know the route to market, rail, and warehouse. You walk carefully, because the body is stiff from standing. The first block can feel uneven. Knees loosen. The lower back protests, then accepts motion. Hands stay tucked away if the wind is sharp. If there is rain, it fine spots your coat and darkens the brim of your hat. Baltimore's harbor weather has a way of entering seams, cuffs, and collars. After a day inside damp air, the outside damp feels almost personal, as if it knows you. Maybe you pass a storefront where canned goods are displayed, tins stacked behind glass with bright labels facing outward. Some may be oysters, though not necessarily from your house. You understand those cans differently than a passerby would. You know the weight behind the neat paper. You know the cold hands, the wet floors, the careful seams. A shop window turns labor into order, price, and choice. The cannery turns water and shell into that possible order. If you stop for bread, the bakery smell is startling. Warm yeast, flour, crust, and sugar enter the senses after hours of brine, and the difference is nearly enough to make you close your eyes. The loaf is wrapped or handed over with tongs, and the paper feels dry in your hand. Dryness itself can feel luxurious after the oyster house. You carry it carefully, not wanting cannery damp to touch the bread. Trades meet in small parcels at the end of the day. A grocer may have barrels, sacks, tins, and jars arranged in close quarters. Soap, onions, kerosene, coffee, potatoes, canned peaches, salt fish, and crackers all share the shop air. Your own work sits among these things invisibly, part of the larger world of stored food. In the 1930s, preserved goods mattered to households, balancing cost, season, and convenience. A can is not just a can. It is time held on a shelf, supper protected from uncertainty. The oyster capper knows that protection by its edge. You have helped make food that can wait. That is a humble power. Fresh oysters are immediate, tied to cold, distance, and quick use. Canned oysters travel beyond that narrow window. They become possible for people who live away from the bay, people who want stew in a place without tide water, people who need food that will keep. Your work is part of that extension, though your own supper may be very plain. At home, the light is softer than factory light. Even if the lamp is dim, it belongs to you more than the bulb over the bench. Shadows fall around furniture, not machines. The floor may creak, but it does not shine with rinse water. You take off outdoor things, set down parcels, and let the room recognize you. The day's rhythm is still in your arms. When you reach for a cup, the motion has a trace of reaching for a lid. The evening meal may be eaten with family, boarders, or alone, depending on the life around the job. Sleep scripts often make work solitary, but real working life is usually woven through other people's needs. A child's question may interrupt your first bite. A neighbor may knock. Someone may need help with a stove or a hem. The capper's day does not earn a perfectly silent evening. It earns whatever evening the household has, with its small demands and comforts. Still, there is a quieter place inside the tiredness. After food, after washing, after the first settling, the body begins to drop the factory pace. The breath lengthens. The shoulders realize no tray is coming. The fingers uncurl and rest on cloth, wood, or lap instead of tin. The mind may drift back to the line, but less sharply now. The machine's rhythm becomes memory rather than instruction. The day loosens its hold by degrees. If you mend something in the evening, needlework feels nothing like capping, and yet somehow related. Both ask for small accuracy. Both use fingertips. Both correct little unevennesses before they grow worse. The needle passes through cloth, and your hand may welcome the softness after metal. A seam in fabric lies under your fingers, and perhaps the word seam briefly recalls the rolled seam of a can. Work leaves comparisons everywhere, quiet and uninvited. The radio, if one is present and if the household uses it, brings voices from elsewhere into the room. News, music, advertisements, comedy, sermons, markets, songs. The sound is thin compared with live speech, but it fills corners gently. You may listen without following every word. After a day of machinery, a radio's steady murmur can feel like company that asks nothing from your hands. The outside world becomes sound, while your own body finally becomes still. When sleep approaches, it may come first to the hands. They grow warm under a blanket or near the body. The sore places stop reporting each separate complaint. The skin still smells faintly of soap and oyster, but it no longer matters. You have done what the day asked. Not all life has become easy, and not all worries have left, but the working hours are behind you for now. The bench is elsewhere, the machine is dark, the caps are stacked for morning, and before morning returns, we can rest for a while in the longer pattern of the Baltimore oyster capper's season, where days gather like cans in a crate, similar from outside and different in the hand. Some days begin with frost on the edges of windows and a hard cold in the street. On those mornings, every metal thing in the cannery seems to have kept the night inside it. The caps sting the fingertips. The cans feel as though they have been stored in the weather itself. Workers move stiffly at first, rubbing hands, blowing into sleeves away from the food, and waiting for steam to make the room bearable. Winter is both the oyster's season and the worker's trial. The cold changes sound, shells knock more sharply, doors thud harder, voices seem closer because people speak through scarves and collars. The boiler's first warmth feels almost kind. You stand at the capper's bench, shoulders drawn slightly in, and let the first motions open the body. By the second hour, the fingers move more readily. By noon, the room has created its own damp climate, and the outside frost might as well belong to another city. Other days are wet with rain rather than frost. Rain turns the harbor streets dark and reflective, and workers arrive with hems and cuffs soaked through. The oyster shells glisten in their baskets, and the shell pile outside looks newly washed, though it smells stronger for the damp. Inside, rain adds one more layer to the room's water. Coats drip near the door, floors grow slick faster, steam clings longer under the ceiling. The capper's dry lids must be guarded with extra care. On rainy days, sound softens. Wagon wheels hiss instead of clatter. Streetcars seem farther away. The roof may tick or drum lightly above the factory noise. You can hear water in gutters during pauses, moving toward the harbor with everything else the city sheds. The work remains the same, but the atmosphere changes its color. Tin looks duller. Labels must be protected. Workers speak in lower voices, as if rain has entered the room's mood. There are clear days too, when winter sunlight strikes the windows and makes the cans shine more brightly than usual. The cold may still be there, but the light gives edges to things. You can see the steam in clean shafts. You can see scratches on the machine and the faint oily rainbow near a puddle. The shell pile outside throws hard shadows. A clear day does not make the work easier by much, but it gives the eyes something crisp to rest on between trays. The Baltimore oyster capper's season also has lean days. The line moves slowly, not because anyone is lazy, but because there is less to process or orders are smaller. On such days, waiting becomes part of the labor in a heavier way. You prepare, stand, clean, rearrange, and wait again. A slow day can tire the mind more than a busy one. The body is spared some repetition, but worry fills the spaces. Fewer cans can mean fewer hours. Fewer hours can be felt at home. During slow stretches, the room's details become more noticeable. A crack in the window putty, a stain shaped like a map near the drain, a loose nail in a crate, the way steam curls from a pipe joint, the sound of a single shucking knife when only one table is active. You may talk more with nearby workers, or you may grow quiet, listening for signs that more trays are coming. Waiting can stretch time thin enough to see through it. Busy days bring the opposite problem. The room fills fast, and the line asks for everything the body can give without losing care. Caps are replenished again and again. Finished trays leave quickly. The machine stays warm. Lunch feels short. The afternoon arrives before you have fully noticed the morning passing. On such days, the capper's skill is not only speed, it is steadiness under pressure, the refusal to let the rush make the lids careless. A heavy day can make the ride home almost dreamlike. The body is so used to the machine's rhythm that the street seems to move around it. Streetlights blur in wet pavement. Voices sound distant. The hands may pulse faintly from repetition. Yet there can be satisfaction too, because a full day's work has a completeness that worry cannot easily dismiss. The crates were filled, the count was made, the bench emptied after honest use. The season changes the oysters themselves. Workers notice when meats are plump, when they are thin, when liquor looks good, when mud has been troublesome, when shell stock is clean or stubborn. These observations may pass through the room in practical phrases. Good lot today. Small ones. Muddy batch. Nice liquor. Such words are simple, but they carry knowledge of water, weather, handling, and market standards. The capper hears them and later feels their consequences in the can. If a batch is especially wet, your rag works harder. If the meats sit high, lids need more care. If shells have left small chips despite sorting, the line must watch more closely. The capper's job is downstream, but downstream does not mean detached. Everything from the oyster bed to the shucking table can arrive as a small problem at your station. This is why you learn the whole room, even while standing in one place. The cannery may employ people with different accents, family histories, neighborhoods, and paths into the trade. Baltimore's working waterfront draws many kinds of labor, and the oyster industry has long included black workers, immigrant workers, women supporting households, men between other jobs, young people learning, older people enduring. The exact mix changes by house and year, but the shared room makes a temporary community of necessity. You may know someone only by first name and still trust their hands in the line. Friendships form in fragments, a shared basin, a joke during a pause, a warning about a slick patch on the floor, a bit of lunch offered without fuss, a walk to the streetcar. Work friendships do not always need evening visits or long confidences. Sometimes they are built from repeated nearness and small reliability. The person who slides caps closer when you are busy has said something, even without words. The person who watches your station during a quick errand has done the same. There are tensions too, because real rooms contain real fatigue. A late tray can irritate the person waiting. A careless upstream task can burden the capper. A foreman's impatience can sharpen the air. Low wages, uncertain hours, and sore bodies do not produce endless gentleness. But in this telling, we keep our attention on the quiet ways people make the day livable, because those ways are often what allowed the work to continue. Calm is not the absence of strain, it is strain carried without spectacle. As the season goes on, your hands toughen and suffer at the same time. Skin learns the work, then cracks from water and cold. Fingers grow surer, yet joints ache more readily. You might use salve at night if you have it, rubbing it into knuckles before sleep. The smell of it mingles with soap and oyster, a small domestic remedy against industrial damp. Care of the hands becomes care of the wage, the household and the self. The capper's ears also learn the room. At first the cannery may seem like one large noise, but over time the sounds separate. Good seeming, bad seeming, empty tins, filled tins, shells dumped hard, water running where it should, a crate dropped too roughly, a foreman's call, a boiler sound that means someone else will soon move. You know these signals without turning every time. The body saves effort by listening widely and looking narrowly. Smell teaches too. Fresh brine, old brine, hot metal, clean soap, sour cloth, paste, wood, coal smoke, rain on coats, lunch coffee, shell pile, wet rope, and the sharp warning of anything spoiled. The nose is part of the trade, even if no one pays it separately. In food work, smell can protect everyone. It can also carry memory more deeply than sight. Years later, a whiff of tin and salt might return you to the bench before any photograph could. The capper's eyes learn to rest while working. They focus sharply on the rim, then soften to the tray, then sharpen again. Looking too hard all day can tire a person as surely as lifting. So you develop a rhythm of vision. Near, nearer, away for one breath, near again. The window, the stack, the rim, the seam. This movement keeps the world from flattening entirely into tin circles. It gives the mind small distances to travel. The work also has a moral texture that no rulebook fully captures. Do not pass along what you know is wrong. Do not leave a mess for the morning. Do not slow another worker carelessly. Do not waste supplies that cost the house and may cost the crew. Do not pretend not to see a problem because the hour is late. These are practical ethics, born from shared dependence. They are not spoken beautifully, they are lived plainly. By the middle of the oyster season, the Baltimore Capper's bench can feel as familiar as a kitchen table, though far less forgiving. You know where the light falls best in the morning and where shadows gather later. You know which floorboard wobbles slightly under your left foot. You know the machine's small delay after a cold start. You know how many caps make a comfortable stack and how many become awkward. You know which rag is too thin, which brush has lost its bite, and which pail handle pinches when full. Familiarity does not make the work easy. It makes the effort more exact. A kitchen table welcomes rest, talk, and meals. The Capper's bench welcomes performance. It does not care if you slept poorly, if the streetcar was late, if your hands are sore, if worry followed you from home. It offers only the next can. Yet because it is familiar, it also offers a kind of refuge. The day's problems may be many, but the bench's problem is clear. Close the can properly, then close the next. Clarity can be a comfort when life outside is complicated. The Depression years sit around this work like cold around a window frame. They are not always spoken of directly because hardship becomes daily weather when it lasts long enough. A neighbor out of work, a relative moving in, a bill delayed, a shop extending credit or refusing it, a child needing shoes. Against these things, the cannery shift is not merely tiring, it is a thread of stability, even if thin, even if seasonal, even if uncertain. You hold that thread with damp hands. Sometimes a worker leaves for another job and the room absorbs the absence. Someone else takes a station. A new rhythm must be learned. The oyster line is both personal and impersonal that way. It depends on individuals, yet it keeps moving when individuals change. You may miss a voice near the basin or a hand that set trays neatly. Then, after enough days, the room learns a new pattern. Work remembers and forgets at the same time. A younger worker learning the Capper's role might ask how you know when the seam is right. You could explain some of it. The lid should sit flat. The rim should roll evenly. The sound should be smooth. The finished edge should not show gaps or buckling. But some knowledge resists full explanation. You place a good can in one hand and a doubtful one in the other, and let the difference speak through weight and touch. That is often how trades teach best. The apprentice hand is awkward at first. It presses too hard, then too lightly. It forgets to wipe. It trusts the eye alone. You correct without making a performance of it, because everyone has been corrected. The room has no use for pride that cannot learn. After a while, the new hand becomes less new. The lid settles. The motion shortens. The machine's timing is felt rather than guessed. A quiet job continues through such transfers of touch. The older workers may carry memories of busier oyster years or of different houses, different equipment, different rules. They may speak of times when shell piles were larger, when pay was worse or better, when a certain foreman worked people too hard, when a brand name changed hands, when a winter storm closed everything for days. These stories come in scraps, usually during pauses. They give the bench a past beyond your own hours. The trade becomes not just today's work, but inherited weather. You listen while capping, catching pieces between machine turns. Not every story needs a response. Sometimes listening is enough, especially when hands are busy. A place like this keeps history in talk, scars, tools, and arrangements. Official records may keep shipments and names of owners, but workers keep the feel of the coldest room, the worst floor, the best knife. The day a load came in muddy, the week everyone's hands cracked. Memory works close to the skin. The oyster capper's day also depends on maintenance you may rarely see. Someone sharpens, repairs, oils, orders, unloads, sweeps, checks boilers, handles waste, fixes belts, replaces worn parts, and negotiates with the building's old stubbornness. Machinery creates its own support work. A smooth day at your bench may be partly thanks to a repair made after hours by a person whose name is not on the label either. Quiet labor stands behind quiet labor. When something does break, the room changes immediately. A machine stop is not just silence, it is a rearrangement of time. Cans wait, workers look up, someone fetches the person who can fix it. The line behind may slow or divert if possible. You stand with hands ready, feeling the pressure of delayed work gathering without motion. Waiting during a breakdown is tense in a low, practical way. No one wants drama. Everyone wants the sound to return. If the repair is simple, the room exhales when the machine turns again. The first few cans are watched closely. Your hands are more cautious, your ear sharper. Then, if the seams hold, the work gradually trusts the machine again. Trust in tools is built and rebuilt many times. It is never abstract. It comes from the next can closing properly, then the next, then the next. Mechanical confidence is repetition wearing a calm face. At times, management may introduce a new procedure, a slightly different can, a new label order, or a revised way of tracking batches. Workers adjust, sometimes with irritation, sometimes without comment. The bench changes by inches. A new size requires a new reach. A new rule requires a new pause. A new inspection requires a new check. Industrial history often looks like large inventions from far away, but at the station it appears as altered motions in the hand. The oyster capper may not choose those changes, but you live them through the body. If a new can is easier to seam, your wrist knows. If a lid is cheaper and more troublesome, your thumb knows. If a new schedule compresses work, your shoulders know. This is why workers' knowledge matters, even when not formally invited. The people touching materials all day understand consequences that ledgers may record only later, if at all. As the season bends toward its later weeks, the city outside shifts too. Holidays may approach or pass. Markets may change. Cold may deepen, then loosen. The harbor may carry ice at the edges one week and rain-dark water the next. Inside the cannery, the bench remains steady, but the light through the window tells the year. A quiet job is never outside time. It is one of the ways time becomes visible, stack by stack, tray by tray. And as another late afternoon gathers around the caps and cans, you feel how the Baltimore oyster capper's routine is both narrow enough to soothe and wide enough to hold an entire working world. And as another late afternoon gathers around the caps and cans, you feel how the Baltimore oyster capper's routine is both narrow enough to soothe and wide enough to hold an entire working world. The last light rests on the bench, dull and silver, and the remaining lids sit in a short stack beside the quiet machine. Your hand reaches for one more can, not hurried, not reluctant, only present, and the cap settles with the soft certainty of a thing placed where it belongs. The seamer turns for the final few cans, each one closing with that familiar rounded sound. The finished tray is lifted away, and the space it leaves behind seems larger than it should. You wait one breath, then another, and no new tray comes. The room does not announce the ending. It simply stops asking for more. Warm water gathers around your fingers as you wash the bench, and the day's brine loosens into the pail. The machine cools under the cloth. The rag moves over metal, over the place where your wrist has rested, over the small damp marks left by work that has already gone onward. Around you, other hands are putting away knives, rinsing boards, stacking crates, and lowering the voice of the cannery one task at a time. The harbor outside has turned dark and soft, and Baltimore's evening presses gently against the windows. The smell of oysters remains, but it is quieter now, folded into soap, wet wood, coal smoke, and the cold air slipping under the door. Your apron hangs with the others. Your hands are clean enough. The caps are covered, the floor is rinsed, and the machine waits in stillness for a morning that does not need to be thought about tonight. For now, there is only the quiet bench, the dim lamp, and the last pale shine of tin in the room. The work has passed through your hands and moved on, leaving the cannery washed, cooled, and resting by the harbor,